Very good morning to everyone. Good morning, good morning. Maybe you can find your seat so that we can begin. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I really would like to welcome all of you to the 57th Council meeting, even if the weather is not necessarily welcoming, but I can assure you for the next 3 days, it will be getting better and better. As some of you may have in this room, I spent a few days in Madrid for Climate COP25, and maybe like you, I came out of it feeling quite frustrated. It's quite difficult to be fully upbeat when I think about what we couldn't really do during the COP25, because we were collectively failed to raise the overall ambition of the climate change. And this sentiment of the frustration is kind of amplified because the message from science is getting clearer and louder why we need a climate ambition, and also that when you see the demonstration on the ground, on the street, and globally, you see the huge disconnect between the negotiation room and how the citizens feel around the globe. So with those kind of disconnect between the science and the kind of negotiation, disconnect between negotiation and the people's feeling, I think we have a huge challenge to how to bridge these two disconnect. And under such circumstances, I think we must reflect on what kind of thing we can do, the institution like GEF. What can we do with that? So first, let's think why we were stuck and not able to collectively come up with a great ambition. I think we all know that the transition required is not really an incremental small thing. In fact, the scientists tell us we need an unprecedented, massive transformation in our economic way of doing business. Basically, we need to move away from very linear, fossil fuel-based economic way of doing business towards much more circular, regenerative, and the economic model which value the natural capital. So this shift is not small thing. It's really, really massive and unprecedented system change which is required, and that's why it's so difficult, and particularly inertia is a powerful enemy when driven by vested interests and fear of change. Interestingly, it's not only science who tell us that we need this transition. You may have seen the several economic studies also making the same point. I just want to give you two examples. Recently, Rodney-Stern wrote several reports and mentioning that what we need to see is a huge transition. It's not easy. However, once you move on to this green revolution or green development, it's really, really beneficial to everyone. We may have 65 million additional low-carbon jobs, additional 2.8 trillion made available from carbon pricing revenue. So it's really good for everyone. And it's so interesting, if you may remember, Rod Stern is the one who wrote a so-called famous Stern Review in 2006, and he alerted a huge cost of inaction of climate change. He's now writing a report in a very different way. If you are able to make that transition, it's really a good, strong message. He told us that it's a 21st century century is a growth strategy, growth story. So it's kind of a shift that the very interesting one, a cost of inaction to us, that what we can do together if we are able to make that transition. Another interesting report is written by Food and Land Use Coalition, the Growing Better report. This also tells us that if we were able to shift the food system, which is currently costing us 12 trillion US dollars because of its health and environmental the harm, but if we were able to make the transition of sustainable food system, it's not only erase those negative costs, but it actually gives us an additional 4.5 trillion US dollars of the new economic opportunity. And it's also good for that rural transition, or more like a fair, just transition to small farmers around the globe. So this is also the very interesting story. The question is how we were able to make that systemic transition, either in the food system or the energy transition or city space. And this is something we that the GF need to really think through. To us, that one of the key to make this transition easier is how to create this multi-stakeholder coalition, because it's becoming very clear to maybe every one of us that this big transformation cannot be just handled by one part of the government or environmental ministers. The challenge is much bigger. So we need to find a way to bring the all key, actually the whole the government, and it's not only national government, sub-national government should play a very key role, and we need to bring the business people, business and finance together, and the citizens. So we need a multi-stakeholder coalition to really shift or transform the key economic system, be it in the energy system, the food system, the city system, and how to make the production, the consumption more circular. So this is something that we at GEF are trying to do for the last few years, particularly through the GEF7 negotiation towards a system change and the importance of multi-stakeholder coalition. Just looking back for the last few months, and not only just the Madrid Climate COP, actually I would say I have been quite excited to see what's going on in around this globe. Even just since we met last June for this last council, there are quite an exciting movement taking place around the globe, and these are kind of very much driven by this super year 2020. You may have heard this buzzword, the super year 2020. It's basically that the next year there are quite a number of important environmental the agreement needs to take place. That one is that at the Glasgow Climate COP, COP26, all countries are expected to raise their ambition. Then that the COP, CBD COP 15 in October in China, that the parties are expected to come up with the new 10-year framework of the biodiversity. So driven by those opportunities, I have witnessed this huge and increasing surge of the interest, recognition, and determination to how we can make best use of this super year 2020. And the good news is that there are quite a number of discussions ongoing, like New Deal for Nature and People, nature-based solution, 30 by 30 agreement, so that it's not only government, but also that the citizens and the business and the financial industries, CSOs coming together to really think that how we can really fight against environmental degradation and actually make the best use of environment or nature. And it's one thing I was so happy to see those movements is nature not only, coming actually, they're capturing political attention, which they should deserve, but it's not only that the solution to the climate change. It seems that the nature finally is kind of recognized as it is that the important value that of the foundation of the sustainable development. So these change of the recognition is something quite remarkable, and I'm quite excited to see that finally nature is capturing that recognition and attention of the citizens around the world. So I have seen that also participated in a lot of discussion about food and land use and coalition, sustainable city discussion, and the ocean discussion for the last few months. And if I may just say one thing, that one of the event, which was a Global Mayor Summit, this is more like a city-space discussion, but they are using the city as an incubator to try a very new thing, like a circular economy in cities and the food system in cities, and they attracted just not only mayors, but then those business people, the citizens together, and try to do something very new at the city space. So it's just one example that things are really moving into the right direction, in my view. So then the question for all of us in this room is, what is the role of the GEF in this new exciting movement? And here, I would like to say maybe two things. That one is how we could really demonstrate or present the pathway to navigate this very challenging transition. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we are stuck because we were not necessarily sure that how we can navigate that transition, and the fear of the change and maybe immediate cost of the change may be overwhelming. But we need to present, and we can present how that transition be navigated by working together. And our program and the food and land use and restoration program, our sustainable city program, and our forest management program are the kind of example to show the present how that transition may look like. And on this one, I want to come back again. But then here, I think that GEF's role is to actually present the pathway of the very challenging transition and how we can work together to reach that ideal situation, the situation where we would like to be. And that is, to me, the most important role of the GEF, and by supporting countries and business together to actually start and to move on to that transition. Second part of this, what the GEF should do in that particular context is, interestingly, this year I have seen a lot of exciting discussion about target. Now that this group of seeing that the nature-based solution, New Deal for nature and the people, are all looking for that target, which is equivalent to 1.5 degree. Climate change has its target, and it kind of unites people, that there is no more question that it's going to be 1.5 or 2 or whatever, but everybody kind of understands it's important, and people are trying to think how to achieve this, whatever 1.5 or 2 degrees. And the nature community really doesn't have that kind of apex target. And there is a surging interest and increasing interest of what would be the equivalent to 1.5 degree, and how we can come up with something that we are all stick to. And it's quite a fascinating discussion. And maybe some kind of consensus kind of emerging that from some part of the world, and maybe net zero loss of the nature, or that the discussion is kind of ongoing towards that Kunming COP of the CBD. But I think one thing we shouldn't forget is that target doesn't mean much unless it is achieved. And when we see the Aichi framework, that and there are 20 targets in the Aichi biodiversity framework. Do you know which one is the worst one? It's actually the agriculture one. So unless you need to find a way to how to work with the agriculture sector, how you can come up with a sustainable food system food system, whatever number we do agree, it will be just number on paper. So I think that the GEF's role in this target discussion is that while it's important to the community to come up with a target, we should also present how to achieve that target. Otherwise, we will repeat the same mistake we have done for the IT target. And here I see that the role of the GEF is extremely useful, extremely instrumental. And we have been already doing some of those programs on the ground. We just need to bring those kind of things together to see that how we can really help the community, not only discussing and agree on the numbers or the target, it should accompany this idea that how those targets be achieved, and several of our programs under GEF7 really show the present the way that how to navigate those transitions, and I think this is the role of the GEF. I think we could really we could play. So with that, these are maybe key goal. In my view, that a key contribution of the GEF can do to this ongoing conversation in the global sustainability or environmental community, then I want to continue to think a little bit more what exactly it means to this room. In order for us to do make those contributions, we have two pillars that we need to take care of. One pillar is our projects and the program. This is a delivery to the countries and the community how you could really use to achieve this goal. But the second pillar is also important. This is how we can be sure to keep our house in order, so that the GEFs and policy and the institution, the behavior need to be put in place to ensure those delivery of the projects and the program. So these are two pillars of the GEF to be to take care of. First, project and the program for the delivery mechanism, and then a policy that the regulation, the capacity and the behavior as a foundation to deliver those projects and the program. Let me say a few words of each of them. In terms of a project and program, today we will discuss the work program which we will present, and this is one of the largest program in GEF's history, but it also includes several transformative program. It is we present for your consideration, Sustainable City Program. It's a big system change program. But interestingly, that when we started the Sustainable City Program under GEF6, it's more like a city as a leader to fight against climate change. But when we have seen the proposal, now the cities are also taking into account the nature aspect when they designed the city. So it's quite an evolution in my mind. But anyway, it's really a good news that the city leaders are taking the lead, not only fight against climate change, but also to try to take care of the nature aspect in city design. We will add 5 more countries and the food and land use and the restoration program. So it's going to be 23 countries and covering several few key commodities. So this is a very important program as a vehicle to navigate the transition of food and land use system. Then we have also have an e-mobility program as a transition of how to transition the energy system. So these are maybe interesting ones, but then in terms of protecting key biomes or ecosystems, I want to mention 2 new programs. One is a Blue Alliance for the Ocean. First time in the GEF's history, we come up with a very big coalition with foundations that we put 25 million. I think that several institutions put a total 75 million, so it's going to be a very big program to really address that ecosystem or that the ocean, how the ocean can also serve the sustainable development. Not only that, we also ensure that their health. Then another interesting program is that inclusive conservation conservation program, which eyes with the role of indigenous people as a guardian of the ecosystem. And this is the first time that GEF has direct eyes with the indigenous people in this big program. So that's another important element. This is not a new program, but I also want to mention the ongoing program of Amazon. You may have remembered that there is a huge crisis in the Amazon fire over summertime, and it's actually just still kind of continuing. But you may have also remembered that our ongoing Amazon Sustainable Landscape Program is actually cited that by the head of state of the Amazon countries, I think it's 8 of them, when they come up with the so-called Leticia Pact, which takes the Amazon as an integrated unit, and also take the very strong leadership as a local, as a leaders. So this Leticia Pact, which was signed back in September, actually that recommend that GEF supported Amazon Landscape Program, Sustainable Landscape Program, number 2, to be accelerated. So to us, it's really a pleasure and honor for those Amazon countries' head of state actually they refer to GEF-supported program as a basis of the consortium, and we are definitely accelerating that the preparation for the ASL2 while implementing the ASL1. And this is more like a platform approach because it's not only GF, it's definitely Amazon countries, and both national and subnational, but also several actually the key donors and also the players and on the ground. Interestingly, last week in Madrid, now that the Brazilian 7 states came together and also created a consortium, and they try to do also that the more integrated, united, common approach for Amazon, and we were invited that how the GEF can help their consortium. So all in all, our approach to work within a local institution and to take the Amazon as a united biome seems to be really appreciated by leaders in that region. So that just to continue to talk about a little bit of the programming side, that you will see that private sector engagement strategy, which was the homework from the GEF7 negotiation. We present that strategy tomorrow, but today's lunch, we have an executive lunch session and invited actually that 2 from the private sector advisory group to actually talk about that private sector engagement strategy, because this strategy is very much based on their inputs. So I hope that you, the council members and the alternate can join today's lunch and to engage with the private sector advisory group on this discussion. Sorry, I think this is a souvenir from maybe Madrid. So my last item on this programming side is actually the resilience. One bright spot from Madrid COP is an increasing interest on the adaptation. That there used to be that myth that an adaptation cannot capture the private sector interest, but clearly it has been changing. I have been involved in a lot of the discussion on the adaptation that with private sector, and we were quite excited that their view that what the private sector can do and should do on the adaptation, the resilience. And on Thursday, we will have an LDCF discussion, and you may be very happy to hear that what you approved last year, it's a challenge program under LDCF, SCCF. It's only 10 million window to encourage private sector innovation. With that 10 million, there was a call for proposal, and we received a 400 proposal valued 500 million against 10 million window. So it's not really a shortage of ideas. It's more like a shortage of funds that which as a barrier. But we can come back to this issue that when we have a LDCF, SCCF discussion. So that all in all, I think that on our program side, I think we have made a very good progress, and then we want to continue to receive your support from council members towards this direction of how we could really help countries accelerate their transition together with multi-stakeholder partners. My last point is about how to keep our house in order for us to continue to deliver those projects and programs. Here this morning that we will discuss the few key important policy proposal. We will present the minimum fiduciary standards policy update, and with that update, if adopted, we will have concluded a general update of all GEF major policies, including fiduciary, safeguard, gender, and engagement. So this is a very important piece to be finalized, our effort to ensure the maximum guarantee that our projects and projects to protect the people, financial resources, and the environment. Over the last 2 years, we have put a lot of effort to introduce the measures of efficiency and results. And today, the first item of the discussion is monitoring report. And this will actually shed light to the health of active portfolio, and which presents efficiency and results metrics. So that's going to be a very important discussion we start with. Before concluding, I just would like to thank that the GEF partners, because that of all of those efforts, particularly policy side, we needed the collaboration with agencies to update those kind of standards, and it is a very extensive the process to ensure that all 18 agencies really keep up with and meet that an updated standard. And then at the outset, I'd like to thank their efforts to be a part of this journey. Of course, we have a staff and IO and then the discussion as a partner, and today and tomorrow we will hear from them about their contribution to the GEF family. Looking forward to that. Maybe before, again, as a final point of this GEF family, thanking GEF family, it's not really family, it's more like a cousin, but then we had a very good, actually the collaboration with GCF, particularly during the COP, and this time, the first time in our history, I think that GEF and GCF has a joint pavilion in Madrid. Some of you actually have visited us, thank you so much. And we had a several joint event and blend finance, and also how to engage with countries more. So that all in all, I think that we are really, our collaboration is really getting strong, and I'm very happy about it. So going forward, I think that then we have a huge opportunity of that coming year, the super year 2020. As I mentioned, I see the very clear contribution, potential contribution for the GEF to make to this journey through our projects and program, through our policies, and through our partnership. And you can actually rest assured that we will continue to support countries to make this difficult transition as smooth as possible and follow pathway to achieve their ambitions. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a little long, as I could recognize, but it may be my last but one council meeting, so that I think that I want to take this opportunity to really talk to you and then to share with you what I feel these days. And actually, some of you asked that if this is my last council. No, it's not my last council. I have one more council to go, but actually that I really would like to have a very frank, genuine, honest, and professional conversation at this council, and that's why I took a little bit longer than usual, and really raised my my own ambition, and would like to share with you, and really think so what the GEF as a family can do, and address and take on this enormous challenge we are seeing. So with that, we would like to move on to the first item of the agenda. It's an election of the chair. And as you know, that we alternate, election of co-chair, we alternate that developed and the developing countries. And the last time the Carola served as my co-chair, so this time we need somebody from developing countries. Latina, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I would like to propose the name of Miss She's Gillian Goutre. She's the operational focal point of Jamaica.
Thank you so much. Marita?
Thank you, Chair. Sweden supports the nomination of Gillian Guthrie, Jamaica, as co-chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So with that support, that Gillian is elected as my co-chair for next 3 days. Gillian, please come and to join this table.
And to thank the Council for entrusting me with co-chairing this session. It's quite an honor, and we have a full agenda in front of us, and I'm sure we will continue to be very professional, business-like in getting that agenda achieved. So the item on the agenda, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and I would like to remind the Council that we have in front of us provisional agenda document 57/01, Rev 01, that was circulated previously, and I would like to ask the Council if there are any items to be added on the other business. Peter, please.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you, Gillian. Sorry, technological fumbling first off, not great. So formally, good morning. I'd just like to start by saying thank you to Naoko for your opening statement, which was helpful and informative and inspiring for our work for the next couple of days. So thank you for that very much. Gillian, congratulations on your election to be our co-chair. We are confident that we're in safe hands, and as I was discussing with my colleague Ambassador Fiduciary next door, we look forward to a heavy focus on the small island developing states during the course of this meeting with you in the chair, so that's great. On the agenda, I would like to ask, exceptionally, based on some consultations with council members prior to the beginning of the meeting, if it would be possible to schedule an executive session of the Council for approximately 30 minutes at the opening of business tomorrow morning. This will be in addition to the executive session later in the afternoon for the Selection and Review Committee report. So it's not to replace that, it's rather a request for an additional 30 minutes, and we'd beg you, your indulgence on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Victoria, please.
Good morning. I'm a new council member, so I'd like to say hello to everyone. I have one small item that I would appreciate to be added to any other business. Based on also consultation with other council members, we were wondering whether we could have a very brief presentation on the management response to the MOPAN evaluation that was recently published, and which we very much appreciate. So if we could spend a few minutes on those, if you could briefly outline what you have prepared there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Peter had requested opening executive session at the opening of tomorrow's meeting, 30 minutes, in addition to the executive session that we have later in the meeting, and that's okay with the Secretariat. And then Victoria had asked for a briefing on the management response, and so I'll ask the CEO to address that particular issue.
This MOPAN report has never been really the agenda item of the official council discussion because of its nature, that usually we take up that discussion about those institutions like IO, stuff, but the MOPAN one is a kind of led by several of the donor countries, but not the entire council. So that the status is somewhere kind of informal in nature, and we have hosted 2 lunch meetings to discuss that. So I feel a little hesitant to take it as a part of the official agenda, but then maybe we can think about that some discussion session, the informal session, maybe sometime tomorrow lunchtime or something like that. So let us think about it, and then to find some way to actually respond to your needs.
Okay, good. So with just one slight amendment to the agenda with the executive session that has been requested, can I now ask the council to adopt the agenda? Any objections to the adoption of the agenda? The agenda is so adopted. And now turn over to the CEO for agenda item number 4.
Thank you, Gillian. So let's move on to this very important agenda item, the monitoring report. As I mentioned, it is a backbone of the GEF to make sure that our house is in order. So I'd like to invite Françoise to present the paper and engage with the discussion.
Thank you very much, Naoko. Good morning and welcome to everyone. So the monitoring report is the main document by which the GEF accounts for the performance of its active portfolio by tracking progress against metrics and priorities, in line, of course, with the policy on monitoring, which was adopted in June of this year, 2019. This 2019 edition of the monitoring report highlights how the GEF portfolio delivers on programming and corporate priorities. It has been prepared in a way that is directly responsive to the December 2018 paper a year ago called Policy Measures to Enhance Operational Efficiency, Accountability and Transparency, which helped in focusing on providing updated targets and benchmarks. And an important change in line with guidance provided by Council in December of last year at the time of similar discussion is that we present data in this report which is disaggregated agency by agency. We are also proposing as a choice of format to add to the monitoring report annually a deep dive analysis. The purpose of the deep dive moving forward will be to feed data and analysis into strategic issue with a medium-term mindset to inform deliberations of Council. So what are the main findings, main content and finding? I'll go very quickly because it is in the document, but this year's report focuses on providing relevant metrics of the GEF portfolio performance, and it does so in a way that helps us understand better, hopefully, what has worked well, what has worked less well. So let me address some of the key findings here. On issues of delivery and efficiency, the main findings are as follows. On closure, there is progress. The efficiency measures adopted last year are bearing fruits. I'm talking about the enhanced cancellation policy. Agencies have closed projects and had reached terminal evaluation faster than before. Some agencies have done better than others, but on balance, we see progress across the portfolio. In terms of project preparation speed, another target of last year's paper and objectives, it is still too early to quantify progress, as the new cancellation policy deadline which is now in place, will only becomes constraining during the current fiscal year. But we will be, of course, closely monitoring progress with a view of reporting a year from now. On disbursement, the portfolio is going strong with a fairly high disbursement ratio. And we have details on agency by agency. On co-financing, the level of co-financing has increased across GEF cycles. That's the trend. And the data collected so far suggests that the GEF is on track to meet its co-financing targets for GEF 7. Finally, the report shows the value of disaggregating data by agency. In response to Council's request on this point, we provided disaggregated data on essentially 5 key dimensions: preparation time for projects, implementation time, co-financing levels, disbursement rates, and diligence in closing. Secondly, and most importantly, on achieving results. As you no doubt remember, we are in the middle of a methodological transition between the measures we had in GEF 6 and the ones that the new result frameworks adopted in GEF 7 has brought. The purpose of that change was to bring more harmonization, more data quality, more comparability, more aggregability to a simplified framework. So you might find complex the presentation of results information. It is because of that transitional nature, and we can explain into further detail, but the main findings are as follows. The portfolio is already exceeding the GEF 6 targets on landscape and seascapes with improved management for biodiversity conservation. It has nearly achieved already its target to reduce mercury release, a growing area of work in the GEF since the Minamata Convention entered effectiveness 2 years ago. Other areas are still accruing results. In fact, all areas are still accruing results because we still have close to 100 projects from GEF 6 which have not yet reached endorsement level and therefore whose results are not accounted for at this point. On measuring results in general, going forward, the enhanced reporting will take place through GEF 7 core resulting indicators as more GEF 7 projects start implementation. So it's very much work in progress what we are at this point reporting on. On actual results, because I know there are questions, and rightly so on that point, we should reach the capacity to report partially, but hopefully meaningfully, because we would have by then enough of a cohort on actual results by December of next year. So it's still too early to call. So that's the overview of some of the findings of the portfolio. Let me now turn to the deep dive that we're proposing this year, for which we selected the Small Grant Program. So the second part of the report provides a deep dive analysis of the Small Grant Program. The SGP, as you all know, is a corporate program that enables GEF resources implemented by UNDP to reach small CSOs and CBOs, which are the best positioned to harness community support and change into the agenda and the mission of the GEF. As it does so, it also supports capacity increase and engagement of civil society on a broader base, both at the national level and at the global level. So it is a provider of a suite of grants and services, and as such, the SGP has a unique role within the GEF partnership. therefore a selection for this year. So the report highlights 4 main dimensions. It highlights results, disbursement, and closure progress. It highlights some key financial dimensions of the program, as well as country coverage issues. Some observation and findings of the analysis really mark clear, measurable progress. On results alignment, for instance, which was a clear understanding and commitment at the onset of GEF 7, the SGP is successfully transitioning to aligning its result-based management approach to the GEF 7 results architecture, which is structured around core indicators, while of course generating in parallel a number of co-benefits which go beyond the GEF result framework and cannot be captured by the GEF result framework. But all of those are provide additionality to the results representation. On instrument closure, which is one that we had discussed with UNDP over time, in recent months the SGP has made very steady progress in closing past SGP instrument, which helps considerably clarify financial reporting. Other observations and findings speak of significant strategic choices that may be worthy of further analysis and monitoring. On country coverage, today the SGP covers 125 countries, including 15 upgraded countries which are no longer eligible for core resources. In line with the June 2018 paper titled at the time SGP Implementation Arrangement for GEF 7, the SGP has a mandate to reach out to eligible countries currently not receiving grants, that's 22 of them, right? Some of them may be in situations that make, of course, a fast move in that direction challenging. But this process is underway, but remains relatively slow. On trends in use of funds over time, finally, when using the methodology developed in 2008 by IEO in its joint evaluation of SGP, so applying the exact same methodology, the proportion of core SGP resources actually going to grants to CSO and community-based organizations has noticeably decreased since GEF 5, while in parallel, of course, an increased suite of services has been provided at the global and national level. So these are the main observations. And on the concept of having a deep dive as part of the monitoring report, again, what we hope moving forward is that the purpose of this deep dive would be to report and feed data and analysis on issues that are of strategic medium-term interest for Council. So in conclusion, let me first thank agencies for their very valuable help, as the report that you have in front of you is underpinned by their data and contributions, and certainly reflects many layers of consultation over the past 2 years in the evolving way of capturing useful information for the purpose of reporting to Council. I would also like to extend again the commitment of the GEF Secretariat and Management to continue working towards providing quality and meaningful reporting through improved data and analysis in support of proper deliberations at Council level on efficiency and results. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to open the floor for your comments and questions. Sorry, Matthew, please go ahead.
No, thank you very much, and just say it's nice to be back here with all of you. On this issue, on this item, we welcome this latest analysis of the GEF's active project portfolio. We appreciate the efforts to improve the report's strategic orientation and look forward to further data enhancement in future reports. In particular, we'd like to note that we appreciate that going forward, the monitoring report will disaggregate data on multifocal area projects. We were pleased to see that the operational efficiency measures approved by the Council last December have had positive effects. In particular, it was good to see that agencies are preparing projects faster and financially closing completed projects in a more timely manner. And we welcome the progress made by the Secretariat in coordination with the trustee and the agencies to significantly reduce the backlog of completed projects that had not been financially closed. That said, the remaining backlog is still substantial, and we encourage the partnership to continue working to clear it as soon as possible. I would like to note that we are concerned that the international waters project portfolio is underperforming relative to the other portfolios with respect to project implementation progress and likelihood of reaching intended outcomes, at least on a proportional basis. So we'd like to ask the Secretariat if it's determined why this is happening and what thoughts you might have on how to address that. We were pleased to see that the GEF expects to exceed some GEF 6 results targets. However, we are concerned that the GEF is falling short with respect to some other GEF 6 results targets, including those for fisheries and more broadly for chemicals and waste management. And we'd like to ask the Secretariat for its views and thoughts on why the expected results in these areas are underperforming their targets, and what at this stage you think can be done to address those performance deficits. We'd also like to note the $118 million recently returned to the trust fund as a result of the one-time cancellation policy. I think it would be helpful for management to develop a set of options for us to consider in June on how best to utilize those resources. Certainly one of those options would be to roll those resources into the GEF 8 allocations, but we think it would be useful to hear what your thoughts are, what the range of options are, and consider those. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Adriana, followed by Tobias.
Hello, I'm going to speak in Spanish.
First of all, I bring a greeting to all of the council members, to the chair, the co-chair, also to GEF Secretariat on behalf of Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador's constituencies. The constituency appreciates the report that was presented and encourage Secretariat to continue to strengthen the data, as well as the efforts aligned with the monitoring policy. Regarding the GEF portfolio, we see that the Latin American and Caribbean region have received the lowest rating in terms of implementation progress, with 40 projects marked as unsatisfactory. The focal points, the political and operational focal points, would ask to please get a list of the projects, these projects that were rated as unsatisfactory. And in that way, we can analyze the potential causes and consequently, hopefully, come up with a way to correct the situation within our countries. Now, regarding PPD projects, we insist that for our countries, this is a very important program, but we observe that the administrative costs of the program represent almost 50% of the budget. Now, this does include capacity building, but nonetheless, we consider that this is a high percentage. Consequently, we would request that the financial architecture of the program be reviewed and that strategies to lower administrative costs be sought. Also, that there be an evaluation of the way in which these funds have been managed. We propose, for example, that the agency include counterpart amounts. We believe that PPD projects are small in financial terms, and also we would ask that more transparent mechanisms be developed to report spending on the part of agencies. And we consider that it would be useful to have some clear rules of operation for the PPD. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's big. Thank you. May I call on Tobias, followed by Marita.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation and for the monitoring report in this new format. On the actual results, thank you for that explanation. We definitely had expected to see reporting on actual results at this council meeting, but we look forward to see the reporting on the actual results at the next council meeting in December. This is really an important issue for our seat. Regarding the format and the content of the report, the last year's report contained data on compliance with key reporting requirements on aggregated level, including percentages of full-sized projects that had not submitted midterm review and terminal evaluation. And this probably has to do with the new format, but these aggregate numbers do not seem to be included in this report. So it's difficult for us to compare the aggregate numbers from the last report to the numbers in this report because they are not there. So it would be good to get some explanation on why the aggregated numbers on, for example, the projects which have not been submitted midterm review and terminal evaluation. One last point is on the recommended council decision text, which says that the overall finding of the GEF portfolio under implementation performed satisfactorily. And we are not really clear how that conclusion, where is that conclusion in the report? How do you actually, what's the reasoning behind that conclusion? That would be useful to get an explanation on that. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Marita, followed by Mr. Mann.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome the report and Jeff's intention to strengthen portfolio level monitoring, but we agree with Tobias' comments that we had also hoped to see more on reporting on actual results, and we hope this will be improved in the future. We note that a relative modest share of biodiversity is recorded compared to climate in the active portfolio. So we would like a little bit more explanation from you on why that is, given the size of biodiversity in GEF 7. We note that still almost 80%, 77% more exactly, of GEF funds are still channeled through 3 implementation agencies. And we're wondering if you have a comment on that. I mean, we had this working group on the GEF partnership, and I'm not sure what the status of the working group is now, whether it exists or not, but this is one of the issues that we discussed on concentration, so we're still a little bit alarmed that 80% is going through 3 agencies. Finally, on co-financing, we note that the GEF co-financing is carried out in the area of climate, most of it, and international waters. What is done to encourage increased co-financing in other focal areas and impact programs? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wan, followed by Komlan. Mr. Wan?
Sorry, I think I raised my hand very late. It's left. Oh, sorry. Okay. So, yeah, I'm thinking about my actually talking point. But anyway, so okay, so no, yeah, okay. So thank you very much, and well, we're generally fine with the monitoring report and the progress of the operations of GEF. And we welcome the efficiency improvement in particular, and also the achievement on target in the areas of bio and climate change. So at the same time, we noted that more effort should be needed in the sectors of marine chemicals and waste treatment. This is also in line with the target we set in GEF 6, because at that time, we don't put a lot of attention to marine sector, but Now I think GEF 7, in particular, address a lot of issues related to that area. We do hope that in the operations of in the period of GEF 7, we could see more progress will be achieved later. So we do think that with more project falling in the context of multifocal areas, programmatic and integrated program, there are some issues related to a better coordination and maybe potential cost increase. So we do hope that the Secretariat could further streamline its internal procedure and to encourage the IPs and also executive agencies to have the better and quality project design to reduce the unnecessary cost and to achieve the efficient result. We do hope that at the end of the day, with the more comprehensive monitoring report, we could see the progress which we could make. And I do echo with some questions raised at roundtable about the reasons behind the situation reflected in the monitoring report. So although, as Ishi, you said, Secretary would not prepare the response formally, but I do think we do need a deep dive into the reasons why we have sort of the problems and what solutions we could have in our mind in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call on Komulan, followed by CSO community.
Bonjour, je remercie.
Hello. On behalf of the group of West African countries which I represent, I want to thank the Secretariat for the quality of elements in this report. But as usual, we note that there's all kinds of indicators, and we hope that some thinking could take place to better define the indicators and have one or two composite indicators who would regroup all the implementation parameters and which would give us a better idea of the real performance of the GEF. When it comes to the microfinancing program, we want to really welcome this program for its real impact on our communities in their daily lives. But I want to indicate that a reporting system should be set up so that the focal points, and here I'm talking of the countries, know about the financial implementation and the rules for the implementation of the program, because for us, these should be the same in all the countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call on CSO community, followed by Rachina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm representing the GFCSO network. I'm the first time attending the GEF Council meeting, and I'm from Namibia representing NACSO. We would like to present the comments on the Small Grants Program chapter in the GEF Monitoring Report 2019. I'll first start with general comments. We appreciate the chapter on the deep dive on SGB in the GEF Monitoring Report this year. We also recognize the important role the GEF Small Grants Program plays in the serving for and empowering civil society, including indigenous people and women and youth groups. The GEF CSO network has been closely working with SGB, and we very much value the work together. As evidenced by the GEF IEO evaluations in the past, we found the program effective and efficient in supporting innovative solutions in support of civil society and community-based organizations and addressing both global, environmental, and sustainable development issues from the bottom up. We just have some specific comments, and I'll start with the management comments. We were surprised to see the high percentage of SGB's management costs relative to the overall budget, particularly under GEF 6. However, while reading through the report, we recognize that budget items used to calculate the management cost included capacity development and activities for CSOs and monitoring and evaluation. We also like to note that these capacity development activities with CSOs, indigenous peoples, youth, and others are very important technical assistance to have multi-stakeholder policy dialogue and should not be considered as a management cost in our view. These are important functions and contributions of the SGB in empowering CSOs in addition to grant making. Lastly, the GEF CSO network look forward to increasing the collaboration with the SGB and seek Council's enhancement support towards the CSOs through the SGB. I would like to thank the GEF Council for this great opportunity.
Thank you so much. May I call on Latrina, followed by Apana.
Thank you, Chair. I see that I would like to say that the presence of SGP is an important source of funding in our constituency, and we all appreciate the work of SGP. However, while going through the report, we see that Table 10 shows that the management costs and fees take up almost 50% of the SGP resources. I think that we cannot remain insensitive to this, and there is a need to dive further to ensure that the SGP becomes more efficient. So I will request the GEF Secretariat to provide more information on what this management costs, on details of this management costs. We see that this includes staff costs, knowledge management, and capacity building. So it would be good to know how much of this management cost what is the component of capacity building and knowledge management in this management costs, as this helps in a way to promote, improve the quality of NGOs in the country, and we get an idea on the pure management costs related to personnel, premises, and etc. And secondly, I would also like to know whether there are any rules governing the operational of SGP, especially with regard to selection of SGP members and selection of projects. I'm sure there is, and it would be good if they could be circulated during the Council.
Thank you. May I call on Apana, followed by Karora.
So, thank you, Nauko. Good morning to all, and welcome to all our new members around the table. So, this is a very good, rich report. Thank you for that. We note the increased portfolio size and disbursement rates, and note also the trend towards programmatic approach, 20%, and multifocal area projects, 38%. We are very conscious that complex projects and a programmatic approach will require stronger monitoring and more sophisticated evaluation techniques. So we would like to hear the Secretariat on plans for that. Second, on process management, we note that 19% of the active projects are those approved way back in GEF 3 and 4. That means more than 12 years ago. 12? Yeah, almost 12 years ago. And that 99 projects approved under GEF 6 are yet to be endorsed. And therefore, like Matthew, we too hope to see expeditious progress on both aspects. We would like to hear the Secretariat on its plan to help partner agencies and OFPs to work together for this. It has to be a collective effort. On process management, we also appreciate the improvement in pace of project preparation and implementation times. But child projects, it has been mentioned, are taking longer to reach CEO endorsement stage than the standalone projects. Now, since we are moving towards the programmatic approach, is there a risk to efficiency and implementation, and how do you plan to manage this risk? And the third part in process management is that we are very happy to see the progress in bringing projects to financial closure after terminal evaluation through dialogue and monitoring, and would request that priority may also be given to those projects which are due for over 5 years in UNDP, World Bank, and UNEP, I found. The third point I want to make is about the disbursement ratio. So this has been presented as a key indicator of operational efficiency, but as partly acknowledged in the analysis in the report, and I thank Secretariat for that, I think you will have to probably look at the denominator a little better, because right now the denominator is the disbursable amount taking as the share of resources left to disburse. It does not take into account what is the stage of the project. So perhaps if you could ask the implementing agencies to provide a financial flow year-wise and then track them against the annual and the cumulative target, we will have a very meaningful indicator of how each of them is doing on disbursement. So whether this is possible, how much work it will involve, and whether it will improve fiscal discipline is something that I leave to the Secretariat. On results reporting, again, I echo the others who have spoken. We would like to see the actual targets very soon, and also be informed of the reasons for subdued low performance in international waters. It is also GEF 6 target indicators are pretty low on that. Co-financing is something that we discussed at great length during the replenishment, and it was a very well thought through ratio target that we kept. Now, we appreciate that is the highest ever, 9.3 in GEF 6, and we also see the variation across the focal areas and implementing agencies. We would urge Secretariat to isolate the impact of outliers and also examine the distribution of change over previous years across focal areas and IAs. The reason why we ask for this work is that it will help both the GEF partner agencies as well as country managers, the OFPs, to understand how best they can improve their co-financing and leverage GEF to the best possible, to the maximum extent. On section 2, I would like to entirely echo what Rachna has just mentioned. We appreciate the constraints of CSOs and CBOs in implementation and meeting procedural formalities, and I believe UNDP is in the room, so we would expect UNDP to help build standardized process manuals and online capacity building materials to help these applicants for SGP funding. We would appreciate a presentation or circulation of the rules so that all of us can be assured that these are being applied uniformly in country to country. High management costs have also been highlighted, so we would like to understand why this is happening and how it can be managed. And finally, we would like to seek some guidance, particularly from IEO present here, on how SGP can be funneled into larger programs and what work has been done by GEF in this direction. And thank you for a very, very rich report. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Carola, followed by Ari.
Thank you so much, Naoko, and thank you for presenting a more strategic report. That's much appreciated. And I was also going to ask on when we can expect actual results to be reported, but I was happy to hear Francois say that this will be by next year, so that is good to know. A few questions. One was also raised by Adriana on the relatively low implementation rate for Latin America and the Caribbean. If you can give an explanation on that, would be very helpful. And the same goes for, in a thematic way, for fisheries and chemicals. I'm very happy to hear about the efforts to speed up project preparation and reaching endorsement, even already before the new policy enters into force next year. Also, I'd be interested to know more about why the development banks, compared to UN organizations, take longer to reach their first disbursement after CEO endorsement. if we have a reason, maybe we can do something about it. Finally, about the small grants program, we really appreciate this program as such and the support it gives to CSOs and CBOs. And we have actually a few questions. One is, would be interested to hear more about how the programs perform in countries that have less developed CSO networks or that may have more stringent CSO legislation. Second question is, quite a high percentage of the resources is directed towards middle and high income countries, and it's of course important in every country to strengthen CSOs and CBOs, but we would like to know more about the reasons for directing a smaller amount to low-income countries. And finally, a question also posed by Rachna, which is that management costs are really significant as a part of the total cost. And we would like to ask, first of all, to keep a close eye on it, and secondly also to look for ways to decrease the percentage of total costs used for management issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call on Ari, followed by Peter.
Good morning, all. And my constituency really would like to appreciate GEF Secretariat for the report. And things are much clearer now. Some of them are clear, and still, though, I have one or two questions, but those shared by the colleagues here. One is the small grant program management, and then I'm sure Secretariat will respond that, but my constituency would like to see the distribution and then also the content of the management. It doesn't, having said, we all know the small grant program is very important. So we want to just see how it is really connecting and impacting the local level civil society organizations, and how it has really been impactful to contribute to the environment and development process. And secondly, I would like to support the question raised by Matthew. What is the plan of the GEF Secretariat on the closed project without financial closure? And that would be the big concern, because some of the countries in my constituency couldn't really get what they were proposed or submitted to get, and then there are a huge number of the projects without financial closure. So in a way, it doesn't look fair enough for countries. And then about the development banks and UN ratio would be another interesting, but I'm sure the Secretariat would respond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. May I call on Peter, followed by Yoshiko.
Thank you, Naoko, and thank you to Françoise for the report on the monitoring report. First off, I'd just like to note that unless I state specifically otherwise, comments that I'll be making from this seat are on behalf of the constituency of Australia, New Zealand and Korea. So we'd like to welcome the report, following up on previous council discussions seeking increased, deeper, richer information, and can't stress strongly enough the importance of monitoring the identification of results and the feedback to council on those. So this is very much a welcome step in that direction, albeit an evolving one. There's some useful additional data that's been collected and provided for us around speed and status of project closure, and questions around what to do with returned funds. I think we would echo those others who have called for some options to consider. I also, just on that, also want to echo Aparna's point about the disbursement data, and perhaps noting the sort of bell curve of disbursements across a project's life cycle, if there's options that you could consider for a slightly more sophisticated reporting of the disbursement ratio, that would be helpful, because it is a very uneven picture, and a too simple a metric can perhaps be misinterpreted. On the overall report, very encouraged in particular by the data that suggests we are on track for our co-financing ratio of 1 to 7, and that's consistent with other reports that we've received earlier in council meetings since the commencement of GEF 7, so that's very welcome indeed. Would also want to echo comments from Matthew, from Aparna, around the lower performance that the international waters focal area seems to be delivering, and just emphasise that this focal area is particularly important to countries in this seat and for our region. Again, noting my Ambassador Fiduciary sitting next to me, it's a very important focal area for, from the perspective of this seat. Turning just briefly then to the small grants programme, so the second part and the deep dive. And first of all, I think it's a very good initiative to have a deep dive into specific elements of the GEF programming. And I appreciate this was the first one, so we're learning by doing. I would want, first of all, just to note our very strong support for the small grants programme, which we've consistently supported and voiced support for. You mentioned in the report, and it's worth saying again, and in fact the comments made by our CSO representative noted this point, the very strong, important socio-economic benefits of the small grants programme, particularly around social inclusion, women, people with disabilities, Indigenous persons and youth are significant for the small grants programme, and lead indeed to improved livelihoods and well-being of local communities. So the value of the programme is more than just the sort of the data that you can count coming out of it. Having said that, one question, and it's been picked up by quite a few of colleagues around the table, is the treatment of the management costs. I think conscious that the collection of the data and the treatment of the management costs here differs to the way the Secretariat would treat management costs when looking at full-size projects, which is perhaps why we're seeing on the face of it a figure of 50%, but within that the definition that's been used to reach that figure includes, I think, things like capacity building activities, technical assistance, knowledge-based work, etc. So I'd welcome an unpacking of the management figure that's in the report. And going forward, perhaps in discussion with Undp, the Secretariat to consider how they're calculating the management cost to be more consistent with the way it's applied for full-size projects, which I think would answer some of the concerns that we've heard around the table about what seems on the face of it like a very high figure. But to conclude, just to say this is a very welcome report and movement in the right direction for deeper monitoring, deeper understanding, and in-time results. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. May I call on Yoshiko, followed by Kojura.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chairperson. Similarly, we'd like to thank the Secretariat for preparing a more detailed compilation of information on the progress and performance of the active GEF portfolio for this Council session, reflecting some requests made at the last session. The data certainly incrementally help clarify the drivers of progress in implementation by focal area, agency, and region, which to us is incredibly useful, and we are supportive of comments already made on other areas for improvement. We welcome the direction toward larger multifocal area impact programs. However, given the complexity and size of these programs, we feel there is a need to pay extra attention to ensure a system that avoids any deterioration in implementation and reporting quality, leading to any potential slack in oversight, performance, and governance and understanding of risks. In that light, we are supportive of the proposal made by the U.S. to disaggregate reporting on the impact programs. Similarly, we think that the midterm review and terminal evaluation process in that light are incredibly important. And while we understand the extra attention paid in facilitating rapid financial closure of projects, we caution against any deterioration in the content of the reviews or rushing over any outstanding issues in the process. We also echo comments on co-financing. We'd like to know what steps are taken to monitor financial flows or documentation in that area. And overall, we hope that these issues and care will be taken into account as GEF undertakes its largest programmatic work in history in safeguarding the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to call on Kojura, followed by Stefan.
Well, thank you. We welcome the updated GEF monitoring report and the additional efforts that were made to provide more disaggregated data, which we find which gave us a lot more insight into the portfolio and allows the Council to track the implementation process more closely. We welcome the progress in the implementation of the GEF portfolio, especially that GEF 6 projects have outperformed targets in respect to greenhouse gas mitigation and improved land management, that the co-financing target is on a pace to be met, and that we have more accelerated project processing and more timely financial close of projects was achieved. We note, like others, that projects in the focal areas of sustainable fisheries, international waters, and chemicals and waste management have fallen short of targets, and we would like to learn what are the drivers of these shortcomings in these areas, and we also look forward to the forthcoming IEO reviews on the freshwater and sustainable fisheries portfolios, which might help us in this context. We commend the detailed review of the small grants program and would appreciate if some elaboration on the question of the barriers and potential measures to expand the programs to countries which are not reached so far. And like APANA and also Japan, I would like to raise the issue of the programmatic approaches, which we have introduced on a large scale under GEF 7, and which we feel could profit from some more attention in the monitoring review. Maybe this would be an issue for a deep dive in the next review, or of some more evaluation exercises, because for the next replenishment, I think we need enough information to help us decide how we are going to continue with this instrument, and the time is already running. So thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Stefan, followed by Ben.
Thank you, Naoko. Good morning, colleagues, particularly to the new ones around the table. Congratulations also to Gillian. Good to see you up there. Hope you enjoy the 3 days. We'll do our best to make it joyful for you. We thank Françoise and her team for the report. It has a lot of information in there. Some of the points that were made by others are also ours. We note, like Marita, that 3 GEF agencies still make up for more than 2/3 of the funding. Slightly greater, better distribution would be welcome, but we also understand that this is driven by the countries and their preference. On the speed, we also join those that note that an acceleration in disbursement is not just desirable, but it's needed. And there, the very factual report just states how it is, and one would like to hear a little bit more from the insiders that worked on it, what the possible reasons could be, and how we could remedy it. We join those that also encourage, request the Secretariat to come up with disaggregated data for the impact programs as we move forward, just to get a better grasp of what it's on. And finally, on the reflows, we join those, echo those that said, while it's, I don't know if it's good if the money comes back, but at least it doesn't sit idle for even a longer period. But it would be good to have a proposal by the Secretariat of how to handle things like that. And then the old negotiator in me that I sometimes try to forget when I'm in this room, but you know, we all can make statements, and at the end what remains is the decision, and the decision is very, call it soft. We don't want to complicate it, but maybe it can be enhanced a little bit so that we know what we decided, because there were some proposals, and if we believe that there is a majority in the room for having, for instance, more disaggregated data on, or maybe that's too operational, I don't know, but at least on the reflows, that would be something that we could include and say, request the Secretariat to come up with a proposal how to handle reflows, just for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. May I call on Ben, followed by Esther.
Yeah, another technical problem, just like Peter earlier on. Thanks, Naoko, and good morning to everyone. And thanks, Francois and team as well, for the report, which was very good to see. I'll just make some brief comments because I think a lot of the points have already been made by others, but just to flag some of those which have already been made. It was good to see the greater priority in the multifocal areas and programmatic and integrated approaches in the report. As with others, we were going to ask about when we would actually see the actual results, because I think it's obviously very important that we see the actual results being received, and it's great that Francois confirmed that would be in December 2020, so thank you for that. But it'd be useful to understand actually what is the minimum number of projects you really need to properly aggregate, analyse these results, and what were the concerns of not doing that at this stage. Like others, we also welcomed the deep dive on the small grants programme, but as with Corolla and others, we were just disappointed to see that 70% of the resources were going to high and middle income countries and 40% to high and upper middle income countries. So is that really the best way of using those resources, especially when I think there's a low co-financing ratio for the SGP, and what strategies might be used to ensure that there's increasing focus in the SGP on LDCs, least developed countries. As with others, we also noted that with concern that it looked like only 50% of those resources were going to go to actual grants and 50% was going to go to the management costs. It was useful to hear from the CSO colleagues that actually there was other things that was being used for, and as with Peter, it would be useful to maybe get better clarity in terms of definition and the presentation of those costs, so that we actually, it doesn't look such a lopsided picture. And then, as with others, we also noted the poor performance in international waters, and of Kodura, it'd be useful to understand what some of the drivers are and reasons are behind that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. May I call on Esther, followed by Graciela.
Good morning. I will speak Spanish, then I give you some time to put the earphones.
First, thank you to the Secretariat for the new report. I really appreciate the improvements signaled, and I believe we're well geared. It's significant, but even so, I do join comments made by some of the colleagues that it could be better and include other indicators. Actually, most of my comments have already been spelled out by other colleagues, but I would like to strengthen and highlight some of them. Of course, I'm very grateful for the second session on small grants, even though, like others have said, I'm concerned with management costs. That 50% be spent on management costs is something that needs to be improved. Otherwise, I would like to join comments made by Adriana and Carola and know more about the low percentage of projects in Latin America and the Caribbean. And like other colleagues as well, I would like to understand data on international waters and chemical pollutants, because I think they're somewhat disappointing. Thank you. See you later.
Thank you. May I call on Graciela, followed by Leonardo.
Gracias, Presidenta. Yo traigo...
Thank you. I bring greetings from all of the constituency of the Southern Cone, Peru, Argentina, Paraguay, and Chile. And we also are happy to receive this report. We're grateful to the Secretariat for the report. But we would also like to have even more data, that the report be more comprehensive, and we know that the Secretariat is going to improve it and make it bigger. I also like to join what the United States has said. Like to know how these funds will come back to GEF aid, and we would like the Secretariat to give us a report on how this will favor countries and how this will be included in the next refunding. So we also would like to join what said with regard to the small grants programs. We'd like that we could request a re-engineering for Peru so that be an increase in lowering costs is 50% that is being reported and that is increasing in time is of much concern. So our constituency would like to restructure this, and maybe the counterpart could really fix this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Leonardo, and followed by Anna.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in French.
Thank you for this monitoring report. And first, a general comment regarding the follow-up to the results. We'd like that when FEM 7 is approved on the presentation of improved results, we'd like to see an improvement in the next report. We thank you for the breakdown of figures, and we share most of the interventions by other members of the Council. As regards disbursements, we see huge differences among disbursement, and we'd like to know better the reason for those huge differences. As regards the co-financing ratios, we share the opinion. We feel it be useful to separate the development banks from the other agencies which work with other financial tools, which are maybe less complex. Another comment regarding the detail of the active portfolio per topic, per theme, and we'd like to thank you for the presentation. But we see that the share of projects, which include various topics, represent nearly 40% of the total, and we'd like to know how we could better differentiate those programs. And I share Marita's opinion regarding the distribution of the portfolio between climate and biodiversity. Thank you for the deep dive on the SGP program. We'd like to mention that there is a huge concentration of grants to the middle and higher income, 10% we've seen according to the figures we received, and we'd like to know what is the reason for giving grants in such a high proportion to higher income countries. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Anal, and I owe you the apology that I kind of missed your name when I went through the list, so sorry about it. And then followed by Anal, I will call on Sabrina.
Good morning, colleagues, and thank you very much. I wanted to start by very much welcoming this report. We see it as an important step in moving forward in maximizing results and efficiencies, but also in clearing the backlog of unclosed projects. Like others, we were hoping for more of a focus on actual results, but we do recognize that this is a work in progress, and we are very much looking forward to the a greater focus on results in December 2020. At this point, and given the fact that I'm coming in so late, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the comments that have been made, but just to say that we very much support and echo a lot of the comments that have been made and the very rich and detailed requests for more information that have been made by our council colleagues. In terms of a general comment, though, I wanted to ask more about the transfer of knowledge and lessons learned. So this is a big priority for Canada. And while we recognize that this report has been done to inform the deliberations of Council, we'd also like to know if there are any other avenues that are being looked into to ensure that the findings of the monitoring report are influencing the programming decisions being made by the partner agencies. So what are the other mechanisms to ensure that's happening in addition to informing Council? In terms of specific comments, one area that we wanted to highlight is the fact that we've noticed that the higher allocations of the small grants funding to LDCs and SIDS in GEF 5 seem to have been reversed in GEF 6, and we would like greater information on why that has happened. And like others, we've also taken note of the underachievement in international waters, sustainable fisheries, and chemicals and waste management, and we would appreciate further information on those areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. May I call on Sabrina, followed by Fisheries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will express myself in French.
I would like to bring a few comments on the SGP. That is a very interesting program that brought a support to the OSC organization for the implementation of projects that have a concrete solution for the people. And there, I would like to confirm the interest to inform the Council as to the rules and regulations for this program, especially the regulations as to the steering committee, the choice of their members, the role of the focal point, and these are rules and regulations that warrant transparency, impartiality, and performance for the program. And there, allow me to share the experience of Tunisia, where the SGP had a reorganization for the past 2 years with a change of the coordinator, the members of the steering committee, and the development by our of orientations for the program through organizing seminars in consultation, in participation, and all the FEM6 funds were used through publishing 3 calls for proposals. And for FEM 7, the START funds were allocated and within the framework of a reform in our country as to decentralization for collaboration projects for NGOs with communities that were created recently, municipal councils that were elected recently, so as to have local action for the implementation of projects for the environments in communities with the integration of concerns as to climate and environment within these projects. So we are at the disposal of all countries that would like to know more on our experience in Tunisia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. I want to call on Fisheries, followed by Narcissus. Fisheries?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I represent the constituency of 14 Pacific Small Island Developing States, plus Timor-Leste, Indonesia, and the Philippines. My presence here today is more by default than by design. Our council member and our alternate council member unfortunately couldn't be here. So I volunteered myself to be here, especially given the importance of the agenda. I think it would be remiss of me if I don't make mention of the reference to the small grants program. I think at the end of the day, that is the program that a lot of our people relate to. That's basically the presence and the physical face of GEF in the islands. So it would be unfortunate if because of the observation that has been made in the report in terms of the management costs will have a negative impact, especially on the allocation to the small grants program. And I think the point has already been raised, so I think it's important to look into it, whether it's because the management fees have been lumped together with capacity building initiatives. So it's really important to get to the bottom of it rather than referring to the percentage that has been quoted in the report. I just want to say that the small grants program, this is like a lifeline as far as our people are concerned, because you are basically addressing activities on the ground, and that's how people are trying to respond to the impacts of climate change. And I think it's also important to remember that we've just come back from Madrid. I think we're here trying to recover from that. But life goes on, and I think this is where the GEF comes in. While we are talking in terms of what we can do to try and address the impacts of climate change, we are talking about practical solutions on the ground. So that's why for Samoa and also for our own constituency, GEF will continue to play a very important role. And I think it's for that reason why we are here to support, but more importantly, we are here also to benefit from the experience of other member states around the table. So I just want to, because at the end of the day, it's the foot that wears the shoe that knows best whether the shoe fits or not. It's not the salesperson who will come and say, that looks very nice on you now, yet it's either too tight, too loose, or who knows, maybe it fits right. So it's those communities, those people who are actually at the front line of the impacts of climate change that really appreciate what GEF is doing and what our partners around the table are also doing. Because that is, I think for me, just coming from Madrid, it's one of my frustration. In the negotiating room, people are so wedded to their positions. And it's me trying to outbid my other negotiator. And it's always the four fingers pointing without remembering that. I think a colleague made reference to that. At the end of the day, charity starts at home, and we have to put our own house in order first. So, GEF, thank you for being a partner, a valuable partner, and also a genuine one, because we need you. Because at the end of the day, too, we focus on transformational and paradigm shifts. What do they mean? a small funding project, maybe $50,000, or if, for that matter, can have transformational impact for a small community that had never had electricity before, or even clean water supply for that matter. So let's not get lost in terms of the dollar sign and in terms of the amount, because small grants program, they really have transformational impact on the ground for my people. I thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to call on Narcissus, followed by Dan.
Thank you very much. My name is Narges. As a new focal point from
Next time I will do it right.
Thank you so much, co-chairs and also GEF Secretariat. I am here from the Department of Environment, and it's my main question about how Council wants to conclude the monitoring report while the Iran couldn't receive any allocation from GEF since replenishment 5. I expect that Council to get a decision about our situation, and we hope that to receive the positive reaction and support from GEF. You know that it is while that SGP is alive in Iran without receiving allocated fund. We are addressing to a lot of environmental challenges in Iran, but unfortunately we didn't receive any support from communicated countries for environment. I'm here as environmentalist, not I don't know anything about politics, just I know that we should keep our hands together to save the environment. And also I would like to request for transferring the remain funded from one replenishment to next replenishment. And I hope that the Council support us to receiving the exactly allocation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I want to call on Dan, followed by Brenda.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of our constituency, to congratulate the co-chair and to assure her of our support, and also congratulate the Secretariat for the efforts in improving this report, even if it's still work in progress, and especially on the strategic orientation of GEF. This is significant. And we also hope that the next report will be focused on results, and especially on analysis that would be a deep dive and would justify some lesser achievements that are the reflect of some knowledge, so that the reports might help the implementation of the next programs and projects. On the issue of the small grants program, Madam Chair, my constituency sees that in each meeting there are issues that are being raised, especially on the principle that is a standard principle for the governance of this program. Let's call them up so that all countries might, as focal point for GEF, that we might coordinate this program and the orientations for our government, or the direction for our government. Let's recall these standard principles. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call on Brenda, followed by Ornella.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to speak in Spanish as well, since we have the opportunity to do so.
It is a pleasure to be with you here today. It's the first time I am joining the Council. It is an honor. I represent Mexico and 7 other countries in my constituency: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, and Venezuela. Let me congratulate the Secretariat for the document and for the effort made in the management indicators for GEF 6. It's a relevant effort that shows us where we are today, and it's a good diagnostic of the portfolio. I agree with most of the council members in the sense that we need more details in terms of the management, not only in percentage points, how it is distributed, but to look at the problems that were faced and possible solutions to mitigate them, specifically in what has to do with Latin America and Central America and the low numbers for this region. We would like to have more details in terms of the countries, the execution of their projects, and to know project by project. I think it would be very useful for our countries to know exactly what are the problems that we face and how can we help to solve those problems. Another issue that I would like to table is that countries have different budgetary processes and operational rules internally. And this, of course, it poses problems at the time when programs are executed. We'd like to incorporate that as well so that we can see what happens in each country. In Mexico, budget processes are complex, even when we need to get a donation, a grant, or resources from GEF. So we would like those operational rules to be clear so that we can be clearer vis-a-vis the specific situation of the country. Thank you for the report.
Nera, followed by Julio.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chair. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here for the first time representing Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Georgia, North Macedonia, Moldova, Montenegro, Poland, Romania, Serbia, and Ukraine. I'm Ornella, and I am the political focal point of Albania. So I have 2 issues to speak here. So we have, as our colleagues, as my colleagues said before about the small grants, please do not forget that the small grants, they are the only projects for GEF allocations, STAR or other project allocation, that we can create the partnership between universities, NGOs, and government. And this is very, very important. This is very important because we have the opportunity to be in the direct relationship with the people, with the communities. And yes, we have some problems for the management of all this, but please do not forget that we have to understand, all of us, the universities, the boards members, and the NGOs, and all of us, the operators or the representative of small grants in our country, that we are the servants of the communities that we are working, and not just the owner of GEF funds. And the second one, it's about the regional collaboration. So I am representing a small country in Balkans, and we are some small countries in Balkans sharing the same the same rivers, the same biodiversity, the same protected areas, and the same projects, if you want, GEF projects. For example, we have a very big project, GEF project, about the one river, about the protection of Drina River. Drina River, we are sharing the same river between 4 countries, North Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro, and Albania. And we are working with so many projects about this river. But 5 years now we have this kind of big projects, and we are not sharing the same data for the same rivers. So for the same river in 4 different countries, for the quality of waters. And this seems that need more collaboration, not only between projects and governments, but also projects coordinators at the countries and the countries together. Because if we are not sharing our data and we are not having the same data for the quality of the same water, we will create different policies for the management of the same river. And this seems that it's not working. The projects, they are not working. Thank you.
Thank you. Marita, is this a new flag or old flag? New. Okay, so before you, then I want to call on Giulio, followed by Marita.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will speak in Portuguese, if I may.
My name is Giulio. I am the member of council representing Southern Africa, which includes Angola, South Africa, Namibia, Eswatini, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana, Tanzania, and Lesotho. I would like to thank the GEF Secretariat for the brilliant organization which it has been demonstrating throughout this year, sending all the information so that council members have access to the documents and study them. I would like to say that our constituency receives very positively this report. We see the advance, the progress in our region, Southern Africa. In the last years, we saw 8% increase in terms of performance. We have some concern in terms of the unequal distribution of the portfolio. We would like it to be more balanced, and we would like to have more communication and more accountability from the agencies to the governments in what has to do with their reports and the financial activities of GEF. Also, we observe the progress of the implementation of work with the several SEOs in the implementation of the SGPs. For us, this is a flag program implemented by the OSCs, and we would like to CSOs, and we'd like to have GEF to continue supporting these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Then last speaker of this table, Marita.
Thank you. Sorry for coming back. I forgot one point in my earlier intervention. Just wanted to state our preference regarding the reflows. We would prefer that they go back into the GEF 7 pot according to the formula we negotiated during the replenishment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So really appreciate this very detailed and professional comments and questions. So I'd like to ask Gustavo to respond to some of the program-related questions, and ask Françoise and the team to respond to the remaining questions. Gustavo?
Thank you, Naoko. Thank you very much for the questions, all relevant. I'll start with perhaps the less complicated one about the performance rating for Latin America and the Caribbean. which is slightly lower than the other regions at 78% against, for example, 81% in Africa. Latin American Caribbean has revolved around 80% historically, and we have to understand that these data are snapshots with the data that we have from the agencies for that particular cohort. So it's generally typical to see some minor variation, as we've seen here. But if you look a little deeper into that, and it's something that we are doing at the moment, Latin American Caribbean, of course, includes a series of island states for which implementation generally takes slightly longer. So the rating on implementation tends to suffer a little bit because of that general slowness on implementation for a variety of reasons that I think it's known to most people. So that's a bit of that. Another potential factor influencing that rating is the fact that a lot of these projects have been implemented by Undp. And if you recall, I think we touched on this a couple of meetings ago. Undp has changed the way that it ranks its projects, and it's reportedly more stringent, and so that might have also played a role in the slight lowering of the objective. But we'll look into this a little deeper. But we are not tremendously concerned about that variation because it's normally what we get. So on that front, let me go on to the fisheries question, which is again a very important one. But as we know, these projects are country-driven, and the demand hasn't been tremendously large. Secondly, fisheries are amongst the most complicated, most complex, and politically loaded projects to generate and to implement, so it's not easy. And in GEF 6, there was, because of that, there was a slowness in preparation of new projects. And the ratings that you see here, again, recognize that this is a snapshot, only refer to projects that have come for endorsement. But if we take the total number of projects that have been submitted and approved and that will come for endorsement at a later stage, we expect that it will be able to cover about 67% of the target for GEF 6 that we anticipated, of the 20% of exploited fish, overfished fisheries that will come under more sustainable management. So that our expectations that figure will improve in the next several months as more projects come in, because they were again slow in terms of approval in the latter part of GEF 6. So that's a bit that explanation. On the question about chemicals and waste, that's entirely driven by a methodological change that happened between GEF 6 and in GEF 6. So the projects that came in GEF 6 that are now coming for CEO endorsement, they have used the calculation of global environmental benefits using GEF 7 core indicators that were adopted in this current cycle. And this change separates the amount of what we call pure chemicals, which is the amount of POPs and mercury contained in waste stream, and we capture the total materials in a sub-indicator that's not reported in the monitoring report, and we can probably do that in future monitoring reports. And an additional point for chemicals and waste in GEF 6, the endorsements are actually reporting more than 96,000 metric tons of chemicals contaminated on waste that's greater than actually the 80,000 metric tons that were originally in the target for GEF 6. And so 96,000 is captured by the sub-indicator, 9.6, which is not reported. So that was probably an oversight, and we can do that. But again, there was this methodological change from GEF 6 and to GEF 7, and we hope we can adjust accordingly. No, I think. And just one point about, and again, it's not a resolution of any sort. The question about disaggregating IPs. Just one point about, and I'll touch on this again during the work program. If we look at the GEF 7 results, you see that and now the all impact programs are coming, including the last one in this work program, between 21% and 70% of GEF 7 targets to date. On 4 of the core indicators that are more relevant to the IPs, they cover quite a lot of those results, between 21 and 70% of those core indicators just on the IPs. And IPs only take about 23% of the overall GEF 7 resources. So there is a significant contribution coming from the IPs with the notion that they are indeed integrated programs that are not focal area by focal area results driven, but rather trying to build on the synergies and integration. So it seems that the assumption originally made, it's turning out to be quite accurate. Thank you, Naoko.
Thank you so much, Gustavo. Now I'd like to ask Francois and team to respond to this series of questions.
Thank you very much, Naoko. It's also heartening that as we strive to develop new metrics, to work with agencies to collect the data that we need to run them with accuracy, and to think about the dimensions of our business that are worthy of performance measurement and to evolve performance measures that are meaningful, we're actually generating more of a debate, more questions and reactions, and therefore we have an ongoing process of, in a way, informing better, ultimately, the strategic deliberations of this council, not just on an annual basis as we do we discuss the monitoring report, but also as you think through the role of the GEF in the bigger picture and in the strategic medium and long term. So it is certainly it's an extremely rich set of questions that we have gotten. Some of them I can provide quick explanations on. Some others are really food for thought in building the next monitoring report and pushing the effort to provide you with perhaps even more data. And some of them, of course, are also difficult to answer because we are, through this effort, spotting differences and trends that we are not necessarily in a situation to fully explain. But I think one of the next steps for us, which comes from that type of effort, of course, is to loop back this conversation with our work with agencies, which happens at minimum under the form of 2 annual retreats that we do face-to-face in which those issues are discussed, which becomes not just a way of relaying concerns and evolving reporting and monitoring, but also finding out about explanations that are behind some of the trends that we are observing, and therefore interpretation of the same, but also, and it's a very important part, exchanging a lot of knowledge, and the questions was raised, about how to do this better in terms of portfolio management, in terms of approach to disbursement, in terms to approach to closure, etc. So I meant to say by this long introduction that the many points that you have brought to us will feed into this process above and beyond the answers that I am in a situation to provide right now. So you have spotted well, thank you for your appreciation of the report first, but you also have spotted many directions for improvement, and we're very much listening. And so as I hear them, I don't necessarily have an answer, but I am making good note of this. An example of that is closures. It's probably the most striking point in the whole report that, and the India chair actually mentioned, focus on the ones that are more than 5 years to make sure it does happen, because that's where really the most urgent concern should be. Yes, closures should happen faster, and now that we have very good metrics of what has worked in the past 18 months of providing encouragement checks and regular internal reporting to agencies soliciting reaction, we still have a stretch to go, and we need to deal with it. A year ago, the Council approved a target for closure that effectively mandates agencies to close projects within 12 months following their terminal evaluation. So that target has been included in the decision. Well, many projects are still failing this target, and since to that point we have a target but no consequences, it is still, in a way, a conversation that has to be taken further. So we're underway to make progress on this. Many agencies have made considerable progress by focusing on it, and I do think we should have as an objective, as a partnership, that next year at a similar period, we would have dealt fully with the backlog. So whether we need reinforced remedies from Council to move in that direction or not, I think it is a business objective and a very important one, because it will bring good practice to all of our portfolio, and it will allow us to have a much more acute picture when we look at the portfolio, instead of having buried in it some instruments that are actually not alive any longer, but still register as such. So that's one point. You have also suggested that we could do better on disbursement measures. Now, disbursement measures are new to this exercise, and they are quite aggregate and rough in nature as presented here, and many of you have spotted that. You know, the measure of disbursement essentially is, as said, a ratio of what has been disbursed during the fiscal year over what was available for disbursement at the beginning of a fiscal year. It's a classic disbursement ratio for any agency, but I would answer on this that it is very difficult actually to go further and to go to an annual measure of disbursement, which of course would be much more meaningful as pointed, because the agencies do not report to us on a regular basis on disbursement. We get one data point essentially on an annual basis. Even the kind of reporting that feeds into trustees' disbursement to agency is aggregate in nature. And so if we wanted to really zoom at a further level on this, we would have to burden the agencies with very detailed reporting of their disbursement flows, which is something that up until now we have not endeavored to do. So that said, the disbursement ratio standing at 18% is actually quite a healthy one in aggregate, right? Because that measure means, in fact, that on average, if you have an 18 or 18-20 disbursement ratio, you would disburse a project within 5 years, right? We know projects last longer, right? But what it suggests is that we have effective disbursement in the early part of the project, and then we have a closure problem. That's what it does suggest. And I think we need to deal with the closure part of the problem in order to get more meaningful aggregate information on disbursement as well. And so, in a way, I'm not sure we can on this one go much further. But of course, if there was consensus that it is worthy of a detailed data collection, which would be very involved, it is something that can be talked about, right? We did provide many measures, but we still got requests for some that we did not provide. So it is actually very true, and pointed to us that we used to have numbers of MTRs and TEs. We don't have them this year because we focused on other metrics. It's not, of course, difficult to have, and it's a meaningful flow to compare. So we would mind that as we move forward and think about it. MTRs and TRs, of course, are critical reporting moments when it comes to one point that we really have on target, which is actual results. Because the reason we don't have actual results is simply that we cannot claim them before they happen. I mean, this is the fundamental result, the fundamental question of providing actual results. We have to give time to time. And so when will we have actual results on GEF 6 projects? We'll get a first glance when GEF 6 projects come to us for midterm review, of which we have still a minute flow, right? Because midterm review is the first time where an agency can say, based on actual or on implementation to date, we have the following results. And those, of course, are expected to be much lower than the expected results, which are betting on the length of the project itself, right? So when we come back to you with very partial results on a small cohort based on a few MTRs, these numbers are going to be extremely difficult to provide interpretation for. When we will have, when will we be able to give you satisfaction on actual results? It has to wait for projects to be fully implemented, and therefore it carries a substantial lag. So our estimate is the best we can do is probably a year from now, based on MTRs, which is very partial and very imperfect, and therefore cannot really compare to expected results, give you a sense of what the cohort at the time carries. We will get actual results on GEF 6 first, and that's why we have encouraged GEF 6 project to use the new result framework, because that will give us an earlier flow of information to share with you. So that being said, we're very motivated to do it, and even on partial cohorts, we will do it next year so that we can fuel the conversation that we need to have moving forward to have a harder metrics to what we generate in terms of results. There were calls for doing more on monitoring IP-specific information, which could, of course, be disaggregated along the various dimensions that were followed. There were calls for having MFA deeper dive as well, and this can also be done. There were concerns expressed about specific focal areas that Gustavo has addressed when it comes to the specific pace of rollout, but all these dimensions are possible dimensions. It just, I mean, the issue that we do have as we calibrate the proper level of reporting is some of this data is easy to interpret and some other data is harder to interpret. What we have chosen in this report is to share with you very well curated data when it comes to the reliability of the data, knowing that a lot of the debates we'll have in the future, not just today, but in the course of including discussions of future replenishment and so on, will be grounded in having proper flows of valuable information to think through the direction given to the business. Some of the more pointed questions that we have gotten. One question on how come the three original agencies, UNDP, UNEP, and the World Bank, still carry 77% of the portfolio as of now. Expansion of the partnership is recent. The new agencies are gaining market share progressively but slowly, and since the portfolio reflects the inertia of past history, it is still very heavily loaded towards the role of the three main agencies. And so that's what the 77% reflects. Even with faster uptake of new agencies, assuming, we will carry that inertia in the portfolio for quite a while, and so that's part of what's behind that number. Another pointed question was on child project, and the question was raised, why is it that child projects, the question specifically was, seem to be, the child projects are taking longer to get to endorsement. Now, there's a bit of a mechanical answer to that, which we have dealt with a year ago in the remedy policy measures that were brought in following the discussion on the monitoring report, which is as follows. We used to have programs that had flexibility in setting the time limit for commitment within the program, which actually means that that time limit could have been 24 months, it could have been 48 months, which actually means that child project could come in as late as 48 months for endorsement, right? And therefore, the rollout of programs could be delayed when this number was high. What you had decided a year ago is to norm this exactly for programs like for project to a maximum duration of 18 months, because the intent was to make sure that precisely this does not happen. We see the child projects moving within a program as having some great value to move on the same time frame because they can share a knowledge platform, they obey the same theory of change, they have that's particularly true, of course, of EIPs, but they have a logic. There is a logic behind having them together under a program. So the decision made a year ago should take care of this because they now have to be sent for endorsement and effectively endorsed within 18 months. So again, it is the measure of I mean, it's a measure that was very much required, and the improvement is underway. There were remarks about, or questions about, disbursement ratios across agencies and differences that are observed, which are quite important there. It is difficult to provide a simple explanation to this, but somebody pointed out to the fact that there seems to be a difference as well between UN agencies and MDBs in this respect. It's hard to know, and we very much intend, by the way, to put a number of those questions to discussion with the agencies in the next retreat in March, because we want to find out more about it. But there is an impression, let's say, that where blend projects involve very large co-financing, the bigger program moves, but not necessarily front-loading GEF disbursements, right? GEF disbursement may cover policy dimensions or analysis and so on that may come in later after some of the initial work has started, and therefore we do see a difference, and that may be linked to blending, but we stand ready to dig about it and try to find out more about that point. So these are the many directions of improvement that, that you have pointed to us. I'm probably leaving a few points aside, but in the general question that you have sent back, which is how to do better on all of this, I think there are clear avenues that are being pointed out here. There is an obvious need to close down on closures, and I think this one should move ambitiously in the next 12 months with the hope of resolving this issue by similar time next year. Another avenue is, of course, as I mentioned, to work with agencies on the understanding which is behind this. That's very much underway, but what is different in this report from previous one is that because you asked us to disaggregate at the agency level, we can now have a different level of conversation as we congregate and meet, and we can also further the conversation bilaterally on some of the points that this report is raising as salient. There is the option, and we might want to think about it on your invitation, to further adapt policies and remedies if needed. I mean, the natural point of having consequences to absence of closure is one that most agencies have themselves within their own structure, because they do not tolerate to have projects that are terminally evaluated but not closed, and sometimes they don't actually consider further approval decisions when this is the case. So there are avenues for making suggestions on this one, and it may not be the only area. So we need to think about what may be the next series of policy remedies that might be required, and come back to you maybe in a year time or so with those directions. There's a very important element of transfer of knowledge here, and it's coming from various sources. It's coming from the knowledge that we absorb as we look at the monitoring report, and evidently it influences our management of the issue. That's the first implication. And as it gets more detailed, it will enable us to do more in that area. It also feeds into the thinking of our key players here, whether STAP or BIEO, who might be interested in this as well as the cross-agency discussions that we have, which is the support of transfer of knowledge. So we will steer this into further conversation. We will continue to work at trying to improve reporting, and we're thinking, in fact, about aggregating the information which is currently brought agency by agency in the number of metrics across the report in what could be a form of agency scorecard that would gather this agency by agencies, so that we can have support for those bilateral conversations as well. So let me, by the way, if I left anything crucial, don't call back on me, because I'm not trying to avoid it, but there's many questions here. Let me turn to the second part of the report, which is the SGP part. So on the SGG part, the first thing which is very important here to understand, and Peter said it quite adequately, is that the definition here of what goes into management cost has to be fully taken in before any conclusions can be drawn. So the effort here was, in the financial part of this report, was to consider the difference between the flow of funds that goes directly to CSO and CBOs and everything else. Now, everything else includes substantial service provision, and it is, in fact, clarified in the report, and somebody reminded it based on the list that we provided, right? It involves not just fixed cost of running operations such as staff premises, equipment, etc., but it also involves knowledge management and M&E activity and capacity development activities, etc., right? So what it is a suite of services, both at the global and national level, that is provided to CSO, CBOs, and a volume of grants, right? That is, I think, a very important clarification. Now, we were asked to disaggregate that further, and we have these numbers because they've been provided to us by UNDP. And so, just to give you a very rough idea, but I think it'll be fair enough to get their views on this as well, the numbers provided by UNDP show that in GEF 6, where the SGP core program received 140 million, and where about 70 million were given to CSO CBOs. The other 70 million was disaggregated between 57 million that cover personal, rental, operations, what would qualify as fixed cost, and 13 million which cover knowledge management and monitoring and evaluation and other forms of services that are directly supporting, of course, the granting of micro grants essentially to CSO CBO, which is a very involved business and which we never expected to see costing the same amount as running a normal GEF full-size project. So this is more or less the disaggregation here, but the important point is the definition. And the definition is quite clear and encompasses both. Now, what I picked up from the conversation there is that there is, the report certainly strike a chord in showing appetite for a broader conversation, which is a conversation that we should in due course inform, and probably that points to the need to have principles and general strategic directions, both better explicited and better calibrated, perhaps, which really belongs at the time of replenishment, because the core document here that is provided by SGP is provided at the time of replenishment, validated by the Assembly. That was the case in 2018, but up until now, it is a document that is very general. I heard questions about distribution of resources across groups of countries, questions about the financial architecture, of course, behind, and the budgeting principles that are behind the financial flows that we described. There are other questions that have popped up in the past about rules of graduation. There were a number of questions on reporting rules and format and periodicity of reporting. I mean, all of these points would benefit from a more explicit conversation. And I mean, I think it goes beyond sort of the snapshot of data that we have taken today to really have the conversation. But if the wish here is to have rules much more explicit or detailed to make reporting more systematic or on a different periodicity, to clarify fully the principles of governance that Council would want to have on this. This is a direction that certainly can happen. So let me stop here for now and take a second floor if I missed anything.
No, actually, I'd like to recognize the flag raised by UNDP, so I think we should give them the opportunity to speak. UNDP, could we?
Yeah, over here, right at the back. Thank you, Chair. If I can offer a bit of clarification that may help Council with respect to the SGP budget, which has been presented for GEF 6. There are effectively 6 categories. There's first a grant category, which is about 55% of the GEF 6 budget. There's 21% for technical assistance and capacity development activities. So this effectively involves all the national coordinators. I think there are about 125 of them in each of the countries. many of whom actually work on very basic contracts, including without pension, but with basic medical. So that's part of that cost. And the other ones who do the upfront sourcing of proposals, work with communities to get these projects ready. So that's 21%. Then there is 4% for monitoring and evaluation. And then on top of that, there is 6% that is effectively for the UNOPS part of this program, which is dealing with the contracts, the contractual modalities that have to be entered into with each of the CSOs. And then there's effectively what we call a program management component, which is for about 5 global staff who oversee a 3,600, I believe, portfolio of projects. And that is about 10%. And then the UNDP oversight fees, which is 4%, well below the executive board mandated requirement. So that's the breakdown, if you like, of the SGP GEF 6 budget. And secondly, just a point of clarification on the projects that are due to close, I'm happy to inform you that it's actually not 101, but rather 24. I think there's been an exchange of information between our two organizations, so that number should get updated soon. Thank you.
Apana, you may want to ask the question.
So first, thank you, Francois, for clarifying some of the processes followed and also showing your willingness to examine how we can make the data more meaningful and also more accurately reflective of the position on ground. So I have two queries. One is on the disbursement ratio. So, and please forgive my ignorance on this, since I'm not an OFP. So I would like to understand whether this disbursement ratio only tells us when the monies are disbursed by the Secretariat to the partner agency, and does not tell us when the partner agencies in turn disburses the funds to the implementing agency, or is it the GEF Secretariat directly disbursing to the implementing agency? That is one. And second is, what are the triggers for the disbursement? So what are the indicators or triggers? So is it, I assume it's not reimbursement, so that would be helpful, one. So that's just a point of information. And the second is to thank UNDP for this, for the details in terms of the breakup of the costs. And also request, if you look after the SGP here at headquarters, to show whether you are in a position to share formally the rules and guidelines that govern the implementation and the processes in SGP across all countries, because we heard some kind of variation in the processes followed, including the composition of the SGP board, the way in which selections are made of the projects. And so I would appreciate it if we could know whether there is one uniform set of rules for all jurisdictions where SGP is being implemented, the GEF SGP, or if countries have flexibility, and if so, to what extent. We would like that formally shared with the council members. Thank you.
Thank you. So for UNDP, there is one more question actually that I raised from this council. It's about why that the share of the money going to high and middle income country is actually going up, and that is mostly done by decided by on your side. So maybe you could also address that issue too.
Okay. Let me first take the second one first. On the share of resources going to middle income and high income countries, I mean, the report states that about 70% of the SGP core resources were dispersed in these countries. Given that SGP resources are equally distributed among all income countries, I think it's also fair to say that about 60% of the SGP resources were dispersed in lower and middle income middle income countries. Now, the disbursement in high income countries is actually less than 10%, and it represents 8 countries. Of these, 6 are small island developing states, Antigua and Bermuda, Bahamas, Barbados, Palau, St. Kitts and Nevis, Seychelles, and Trinidad and Tobago. On the second question with respect to the SGP guidelines, indeed there is one. It's on a website. We're happy to share the link, and that is the one that we hope everybody follows.
On the first question raised on disbursement data, now, there are two levels of disbursements, I suppose, that happen within the GEF system. One is from, and none of them involve the Secretariat, right? Trustee disburses to agencies, implementing agencies, and implementing agencies disburse in various directions to themselves when it comes to agency fees, to executing agencies, where executing agencies are in charge of taking action, to contractors where they may have a consultant, etc. So now, there's no regular flow of reporting on disbursements that comes to the Secretariat, and the only exception to that is, has been introduced recently. We requested to be notified when a first disbursement happens. And the reason is, the first disbursement is when a project becomes alive, right? And since we have substantial delay sometimes between endorsement of a project and the project becoming alive, we want to be able to track that time span to make sure, essentially, when the GEF funds hit the ground, right? So in order to go further on any disbursement data, we would have to create very detailed reporting on, effectively, the 900 and so projects that are active to us, and that would be actually a very complex exercise, right? And entirely new and additional to the flow of reporting that the agencies do. When an agency operates, say, at the first degree, so either Undp or the World Bank, or they, of course, are responsible to match disbursement requests with accomplishments in the project, and they are responsible for disbursing themselves. Therefore, they have the data and they can match physical happenings with flows of funds. And that's a natural exercise, and of course one that carries a lot of information that, of course, is done across the board of all agencies. Because the GEF does not directly implement, but is one step removed and plays no role in the actual disbursement, it is very difficult to get to this data. Even Trustee doesn't have it because agencies report in aggregate on their request and needs for funds, authorized by Council, evidently, but not project by project, right? So the very complexity of the GEF system makes very difficult for us to give you satisfaction on that, but there are very solid reasons behind it.
Okay, I think we were almost reaching to the end of this discussion. The one point which we haven't answered is that what to do with this 180 million of the resources fund. And in fact, some of you may have recalled that we had this discussion during the GEF 7 replenishment negotiation because we were really looking for money, and we already found out some money to be cancelled, and we actually counted almost half of that 180 million already as a part of the 4.1 billion envelope. So that so far that we found actually a little more than that the money which is already counted as a part of the 4.1 billion, but then this is not the entirely new money. It's basically that the money already kind of identified getting a little more than originally counted. So the nature of this, the resources will be, in a sense, it's already part of the programming envelope, and as we have already experienced very painfully during the GEF 6, that we are that the size of the envelope is subject to quite a number of factors. The biggest one was the exchange rate. We lost almost 20% or 25% of the 4.4 billion, and then we really had to find a way to how to handle that. And the way we did is that we protected the CIS and LDCs, and and then other than that, we basically go for the prorating, and that's what we did. And then maybe we could actually think of the same kind of that methodology to adapt to the changing envelope, but then just thinking about the size of the exchange rate, which we did for the GEF6, this 180 million, and half of them is already part of that envelope, really doesn't give us the huge, actually, and unexpected elements. So I would prefer to just keep it as a part of the envelope, which is kind of, either increasing and decreasing depending on the exchange rate mostly. And then we will just adjust when we program for next 2 years and a half. And that would be maybe the response. So in a nutshell, it goes back to that Jeff Main Trust Fund for programming, and which is already, in a sense, part of that part of the exercise. So that would be my answer to that particular question. And so far, that I think that we have exhausted almost all questions, and we have come up with some of the way forward. But I hear from you that you would like to have a little bit more concrete way forward rather than very general decision, proposed decision like that. Yeah, we appreciate the exercise. So that what I would like to do is that we come up with you that what exactly the decision that we can take, and including some of the measures we can come up to the next June board council meeting. Some of them we'd like to be a part of the next monitoring report, so that we just need to actually identify those decision points, and maybe we'll come back to you either by the end of today for further discussion. Is that all right? Or do you?
I can give it.
No, but I think
sure.
The question is they would like to have a decision to be changed. So that if it's okay, that we would like to propose to you just more like a summary of today's discussion and come up with a bit of decision point and just to share with you, hopefully by the end of today, so that you can adopt that decision by tomorrow. That's okay. So with that, we would like to sincerely thank for this very rich discussion. Thank you so much for doing that. Now it's we need another big decision for next 1 minute. Okay, it's 12:05. Lunch is now 12:30. We are quite running behind today's schedule, and the next item is fiduciary standard, which is another big ticket item. So the question for us is, do you want to enter into the fiduciary discussion? And maybe we have to actually stop there in the middle of the discussion and go to the lunch, because we have actually the two speakers that from outside. It's a private sector engagement people, PSAC people, so that we can't really delay more than 1 hour. So the question is that do you want to enter into the fiduciary discussion now, and in preparation, rather than anticipating that discussion may be actually suspended in the middle. But if that is okay, maybe we can go ahead. Could you just tell us that your preference? Can we go ahead? All right, I hear more nodding than shaking head. So maybe let's get us on that. Thank you so much for your collaboration. So, Francois, you could actually, I would like to invite you to present the fiduciary standard paper.
Thank you very much, Naoko. I'm pleased to introduce the proposed updated policy on minimum fiduciary standards. This proposal follows the request of Council in 2017 for the Secretariat to review the existing policy in light of evolving best practice, global practices in this area, noting that the original standards were adopted in 2007. So the proposal that you have before you reflects and presents the results of this review. It builds on extensive consultations with partner agencies and the trustee, in light of their critical role in safeguarding GEF resources and implementing GEF projects and programs. The proposal also builds upon the important update to the policy by Council in June to include provisions on an AML-CFT. It is designed to provide updated minimum standards to reinforce and ensure full fiduciary responsibility and financial integrity across the partnership. The standards set out the standards created set out minimum standards to ensure that funds will be used appropriately, no matter which partner agency is responsible for implementation of a GEF project or program. They also include a new explicit requirement, not present in the existing policy, for agencies to exercise oversight of executing agencies to assess fiduciary risks, so that proposed executing entities have adequate fiduciary controls to manage GEF funds used to finance a project. This is further reinforced by the requirements of a financial management and control framework, and I quote, that applies rigorous measures to prevent and combat fraud and other forms of financial mismanagement by employees, by contractors, suppliers under the GEF partner agency's own procurement, or in respect of funds provided to executing agencies. The proposed policy also contains important updates to reinforce minimum standards on the following areas: procurement, internal and external audits, hotline and whistleblower protections, investigations in response to allegation of wrongdoing, and procedures to inform Council of cases of potential non-compliance. The proposed updated policy would enter into force immediately, that's what we propose to your decision, so that its updated provisions and protections would apply without delay. In addition, partner agencies will complete a self-assessment and report within 1 year on compliance with the updated minimum standards or on actions required to close any gaps. This will be carried out in line with GEF policy on monitoring agency compliance with GEF policy. Let me also mention that, and you received a notification from the Secretary of Council accordingly, that last week the Secretariat posted a revision to this document to include additional background explanatory text on the important topic of addressing concerns about misuse of funds. The new text notes the responsibility of GEF partner agencies to address complaints and concerns of this nature. This is integral to their role in implementing GEF-funded projects, as reflected in the GEF minimum fiduciary standards. The text also describes the authority of the trustee under his financial performance agreement with agencies where there is concern over misuse of funds. Under the FPAs, the trustee has authority to seek additional information and or to determine other steps as may be required, which may include receiving financial statements and a special audit of the project. Finally, the revised text notes that the Council may request the trustee to seek additional financial information under the FPA and highlights the accountability of the trustee and the agencies to GEF Council under the GEF instrument. These are core elements of the GEF governance system on this key topic. We appreciate the cooperation with the trustee to provide this additional information, and we understand that they are available in case of any further questions on their role and practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now I would like to open the floor for your comments and questions. Marita.
Thank you. We welcome the updated policy and the revisions. We have some comments on some of them, but first I would like to take this opportunity to refer to the allegation of potential misuse of GEF funds addressed to the UNDP this year in its role as implementation agency. We are deeply concerned about this and expect the UNDP to take the appropriate measures without delay within their designated mechanisms for addressing the potential non-compliance with fiduciary standards. The Undp and other implementation agencies have a responsibility to take measures in these types of situations to ensure that their respective functions comply with the GEF's minimum standards, and more generally, the standards that we as donors have a right to expect. As a donor to the Undp, we have during the autumn had a dialogue with the organization and conveyed our views and expectations concerning these serious allegations. And in November, we signed a letter together with some other GEF donors that was sent to the GEF Secretariat concerning the importance of compliance with the GEF's minimum standards. We and other donors have also had a constructive follow-up dialogue with the Secretariat on this. I'm talking about the GEF Secretariat. Sweden will continue its efforts in its contacts with the Undp and other implementation agencies to ensure that adequate measures are taken when such allegations occur. We will now await the Undp's internal review before taking any further measures. We would also like to underline that we also expect the GEF Secretariat in its dialogue with the implementation agencies to underline the importance of their respective compliance with the GEF's minimum standard. On reporting, we would expect that the implementation agencies report allegations of potential misuse of GEF funds to the GEF Secretariat as a matter of priority, and that the Secretariat in turn alerts the Council members. And this is very important, that we would like to be alerted, not wait until the review is done. And in our view, it's not enough to receive the information at that stage. We therefore suggest that a process is considered whereby the Council members can be alerted while considering the sensitivity of the information at this early stage. We fully respect the internal review process of the respective agencies and before any conclusions can be drawn in any given case, but we urge the Secretariat and the implementation agencies to find a way whereby the Council members can be alerted at the earliest stage possible. We would therefore suggest that the wording prompt in the updated policy is further refined, because we think it's not enough with the definition without delay. Finally, we are wondering whether the Secretariat foresees to carry out an independent evaluation of the implementation agencies and their respective compliance with the minimum standards. This also applies to the safeguards, so I will not repeat that question on that agenda point either. We think there should be a third-party assessment, and we were wondering when the Secretariat foresees to undertake such assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. I want to call on Apana, followed by Matthew.
So thank you. We welcome the new GEF minimum fiduciary standards aimed to promote transparency and sound financial management, particularly looking to the limited resources that we would like to leverage for maximum impact. The objective of having acceptable standards and ensuring that they are effectively applied is central to the update as we see it. So the standards should not be allowed to become bureaucratic or cumbersome without being fit for purpose. That would be our main concern. We also appreciate the separation of the implementing and execution agencies, that is the GEF partner agencies and execution agencies, to ensure that there is proper monitoring and implementation of the project. It will also ensure greater accountability for the project management fees that is charged by the various partner agencies. We welcome the more defined oversight of the executing agencies that has to be maintained by the partner agencies, and encourage hand-holding of national execution agencies on their responsibility if and where needed. That would be very helpful. While operationalizing these fiduciary standards, we urge GEF Secretariat to ensure that the reporting and compliance frameworks for each of the partner agencies are broadly aligned so that compliance requirements on the executing agencies, which may be sourcing funds from more than one partner agencies, do not become too onerous. And finally, we particularly welcome the strong standards on procurement and the balance of transparency and confidentiality of processes in the interest of fair and competitive procurement of goods and services, including consultant services, the latter often being most at risk of being opaque. While we appreciate the inclusion of sustainability concepts in the procurement standards, we would like to understand how evolved the available guidance is and to what extent capacity to adhere to them is assured. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I call on Matthew, followed by Carola.
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank the Secretariat for carrying out this comprehensive review of the GEF's minimum fiduciary standards and for proposing these updates. We're generally supportive of these updates, which, among other things, provide greater clarity on agencies' responsibilities with respect to procurement, project completion, and financial closure, as well as investigations of alleged fraudulent and corrupt practices. Greater clarity, however, is needed regarding the application of the fiduciary standards to the executing entities, as well as regarding what is expected of agencies in their oversight of executing partners. Accordingly, both the second umbrella statement and the new standard, titled Oversight of Executing Entities, need to be strengthened to make clear that, I quote, GEF partner agencies ensure that the GEF minimum fiduciary standards are met at all levels of GEF-funded project and program implementation, including by executing partners, end quote. It is not enough for the agencies to simply have the right policies, procedures, and systems in place. The Council entrusts these agencies with the GEF's resources, and in doing so, the Council holds the agencies responsible for actually ensuring that these standards are adhered to by all entities involved in the administration of GEF resources, and this does need to be reflected in the standards. Separately, we'd like to welcome the new requirement that agencies share more information, both in real time and on an annual basis, with the Council on cases of possible financial misconduct. We would like to clarify that agencies' confidentiality requirements will not prevent them from sharing information critical to the Council's fulfillment of its oversight responsibilities. And we are open to exploring a mechanism, such as establishing a standing audit committee for sharing confidential information with the Council. Finally, we urge the agencies to move quickly to conduct their self-assessments and to address any shortfalls they may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. I want to call on Carola, followed by Rashina.
Thank you very much, Naoko. Let me start by saying that I support the suggestions made by previous speakers. We welcome the updated policy and the changes made and the fact that it pays more attention to, for example, preventing and combating fraud, misuse of funds, and integrity policies such as whistleblower and sexual exploitation, abuse and harassment. These are all very important issues, and thank you for your work on that. We think it's equally important that the GEF Secretariat takes its responsibility also to be a critical partner to the partner agencies and keep a continuous dialogue on these issues. Because although oversight and accountability are handed over to the partner agencies, the GEF is the organization that we trust our funding to. And we therefore expect a proactive role of the GEF Secretariat as well, and for it to closely monitor the cases that are at the table and proactively and transparently provide status updates to the Council. And of course, if a case becomes public, we also appreciate and think it's important that the GEF also responds publicly to this case. We very much welcome the good cooperation in this field over the past period and hope to continue on the same foot. Now, going more into the different elements, we welcome the clarifications on the role of the trustee, as well as the reference in the document to the financial procedures agreements. And we really think that the Council needs in all stages to know and to remain informed of what's going on in order to be able to take appropriate action when fiduciary issues arise. And therefore we would like to see more specificity on the procedure that is to be followed by partner agencies if a possible case of misuse or misappropriation arises, and how this will be reflected in the work between the Secretariat, the agencies and the trustee. Also, a flow of information to the Council needs to be maintained when cases arise. In addition to the comments by others, I would have a few remarks to paragraph 7F in the policy. It says there in the beginning that we will be informed in a timely manner. Marita referred to the word promptly a bit further down, but here also in a timely manner leaves some room for misunderstanding, so maybe it would be better to write there as soon as possible. Also in that subparagraph 7F there are two bullets. One is that the Council will be informed, but we would also like to see reflected that the Council will continue to be kept informed through the Secretariat fully and continuously of relevant steps taken in the cases that are at the table. And then for the recommended decision that we are about to take, we would think it would be useful to, in that decision, also refer to the possibilities for the Council to ask the trustee about additional information and external financial audit. It's now written up, but it would be good if we also take that with us in the decision. Maybe also it would be useful if we revisit the issue in December 2020 after the self-assessments have been concluded. And finally, it could be good in the decision to refer that maybe from your side it will be clarified what procedure we will follow when cases arise, how the Council will be informed and who will take initiatives. Because at the moment, I think this is not entirely clearly set out, so it would be good to refer to that in the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Carola. We want to call on Rashina, followed by Kojura.
Yes. The Eastern African constituency welcomes all these measures, which will ensure that there is more transparency and accountability. However, when compared over the years, the way we have been preparing, implementing and monitoring GEF projects have changed considerably with the coming in force and enhancement of all these policies. While the adoption of these policies are most welcome, however, in doing so, we have noticed that more and more resources are going towards project preparation. That is, the amount of funding set aside for PIF, preparation of PPG has increased so as to ensure compliance with all these standards. And therefore, in the bucket, the funding which remains for project implementation, which contributes in generating global environment benefits, have decreased. Therefore, we need to see a balance. Therefore, I will request the Secretariat to make an assessment of the impacts of adhering to these policies on the project preparation cost, like PIF and PPG, and see how we can reduce the cost of compliance with the standards. Examples to do so would maybe like we could have templates for reporting and monitoring. We could have, for example, do we need the same level of assessment for an MSP, like $1 million project, and for a $10 million project? Do we need to use one-size-fits-all for all adherence standards for all types of projects. I'm saying like for certain national projects, like if you're doing a geothermal project, is there a need to do a detailed gender analysis or things like that? So I think we need to look at the portfolios and do an assessment, because over the years we see that the share of GEF resources going towards project preparation has been increasing. Secondly, we also welcome the processes, especially on the procurement. Here I would like to highlight that our constituency members prefer the national execution modality, where the executing agency does the procurement. However, countries should be able to choose the modality of procurement as justified by OFP. For example, in some countries, we see that there is limitation in specialized fields. Recruitment by the executing agency becomes more difficult, so we prefer implementing agency which has a roster of specialized consultants to do the procurement. So I think because for some projects we see that there has been a delay at the level of the GEF to approve the projects. They haven't entered the work program, we see, and the reasons we've been given was that there is, in our proposal, we have put a request for procurement by the implementing agencies. So I would like the Secretariat to look after this, and we don't delay projects because of this. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Kujura, followed by Yoshitomo.
Thank you. Accountability and transparency are foundational pillars of the GEF partnership and remain of utmost importance in its work. We therefore welcome the independent review of GEF's fiduciary standards, as well as efforts made to ensure their alignment with international best practice and their practical implementation by GEF agencies. We welcome the facilitative and consultative process that GEF has taken in developing these updated standards. And we appreciate the steps undertaken by the Secretariat to improve reporting and to increase information sharing in general. We acknowledge the importance of an efficient division of responsibilities between agencies and the Secretariat. Nonetheless, we expect a transparent and predictable follow-up in cases of misuse or possible misappropriation of GEF funds or other cases of non-compliance. In this context, we would like to ask for some more clarification on the following issues. Which is the implementation timeline expected for the time-bound action plans of GEF partner agencies who are found not to be compliant? Is it envisaged to provide a concrete process and format for these plans, or will they be decided on a case-by-case basis? What will be the means for the Secretariat to provide prompt reporting to the Council? Is information through email or a dedicated platform envisaged? What information will be included in these reports? And what information exactly will the annual report regarding cases of non-compliance contain? Will it provide case-by-case and agency-level information? We would, in addition, like to ask for why we understand there was a gender recommendation on including gender-based violence and sexual exploitation and abuse in the standards, and we just want to know why this has not been taken up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call on Yoshitomo, followed by Leonard.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Since this is the first time for me to take in the floor, I'd like to say hello to you all and look forward to working with you around the table. On this agenda, I'd like to firstly welcome the updates provided by the Secretariat on fiduciary standards. We also welcome that in the proposed decision, there is a mentioning about review of these standards as appropriate and needed in light of the evolving international practice. We think that's an important aspect. And of course, more important thing would be to have the agencies actually comply with these standards and then implement them. And in that context, I concur to what was mentioned by Matthew on this point. And for the details, we would like to touch upon the issue of co-financing. I believe that until now there was no clear rule pertaining to co-financing issues. However, since the suggested update of the standards includes provisions relating to financial closures, a suggestion we would like to propose would be to include more elaborated wording about co-financing. For example, in page 21, paragraph 4, where there is a mentioning about project completion and financial closure, at the end of subparagraph A, we may have a wording, I quote, together with detailed documentation on co-financing. Another example would like to think about is, let's say, in page 22, where we mention about governance framework criteria. In paragraph 1A, we may add a wording like including steps to verify co-financing levels. So the intent is that we would like to know the actual co-financing level at the financial closure, rather than having a kind of broad, let's say 1:5 ratio at the beginning of the project cycle. At the end, we would like to know what was the actual co-financing level for certain projects. So in that sense, there may be some confidential issues involved, but as Matthew mentioned, we should be able to know those issues at the end. So the idea of having this maybe standing audit committee doing that job would be useful for deliberation. Thank you.
Merci.
I want to call on Leonardo, followed by Adriana.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the Secretariat and to the agencies for their efforts in updating standards that are coherent, and we welcome this document as sent. You refer to the international standards in general. It would be interesting to have the standards, which ones are they, and where the agencies will respond to them based on the dialogue between the Secretariat and the partnership in preparing this reform. We have three observations regarding the document. First of all, on the procedure of procurement, durability was included in the calls for proposals. That was explained, but we have a question on the procedure for recourse. It seems that there is nothing anticipated after the closing of the call for proposal procedure. Usually there is a recourse after the publication, so we would like to have the Secretariat's opinion on this. As was recalled by other members of the Council, we see that the process, if there is a deviation as to the standard, should be more explained by having a gradation in the measures taken against the agencies that would not be in conformity with the fiduciary standards, and stipulating the role of the Council on this. And then on the completion and closure of a project, financially speaking, we have some text to offer so as to underline the necessity for the partnership to have an efficient policy for closure and completion of projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Adriana, followed by Lauren.
Thank you. La circunscripción de Brasil, Colombia.
Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador receives very positively this amendment and the minimal standards, which we consider appropriate. We would like to underscore the clarification in terms of the procurement and the difference made between implementing agencies and executing agencies. In the past, they were superimposed. We believe that it wouldn't be convenient for an implementing agency to, at the same time, comply with or perform the functions of an executing agent, unless there are reasons that will justify it, and except when it's a decision of the government. In the section that deals with investigation functions, we have to say that the agency should report to focal points first, and then the council situations in which the funds are not correctly used. And finally, we should define a policy to establish what type of exchange rate or reference will be used for disbursement. This will allow for decisions to be made in anticipation. In some of our countries, we faced problems because of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to call on Lauren, followed by Anna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our constituency welcomes very much this policy and the revised fiduciary standards, and we're also very happy to see the changes that were made in the revised document, especially referring to the financial procedure agreements, to the MOU between the GEF Secretariat and the GEF partner agencies, and also to the document clarifying the responsibilities of the different key actors in the GEF. We would suggest, in order to get more clarity, that the policy should also include a summarized version of the document highlighting the key roles and responsibilities of the different entities in the GEF. I think this could be very useful so that all the entities are very clear about their roles and responsibilities, and that this is clear also for the Council. We're also pleased that with the suggestion that the Council will review the fiduciary standards when this is necessary. We have some comments on the issues of misuse of funds. We welcome the expansion of the standards on these issues of anti-fraud controls and measures to prevent and detect fraud and financial mismanagement, and a revised version that includes reference to important legal documents. However, we have some questions, as some of the information in the document for us is not very clear, and this also reflects some of the comments made by the Netherlands. In paragraph 7F on the investigation function, there's a reference on how reporting should be done if there's an investigation that is started, where reporting needs to be done to the Council promptly. It also refers to that this needs to be done in accordance with an agency's policies and procedures. And so what we are wondering is if this reference to an agency's policies and procedures is about the reporting, or is it about how the investigation is going to be carried out? We would also like to have some more clarity on what is expected from the Council when we are being informed about possible misuse of funds. This is also referred in several places in the document, and is also referred in the FPAs. In terms of the whistleblower policy, this is of course very important, and we were wondering when the review was done if the person doing the review has been looking into the issue of the possibility that there will be less cases reported if the whistleblowers know that the cases are coming to the Council. Has this been looked into? Is there any previous experience on this, for example? Then on the application of the standards, we have some similar questions from the US. We think it's not very clear to what degree the standards that we are agreeing on now will also be applied for the executing agencies, and what is the responsibility of the partner agency in assuring that the executing agencies are complying to these standards. Finally, in terms of evaluations, We would like to know when it is determined that an evaluation needs to be conducted, and how the evaluations are conducted by the GEF partner agencies, how these are coordinated by the evaluations that the IEO, for example, conducts. And we would also like to have some more concrete wording on how the results of the evaluations are to be shared with the Council and the GEF Secretariat. And this goes back to a comment made in the previous point from Canada on the importance of knowledge management and of using the information that is produced, for example, by evaluation reports. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I call on Anal, followed by Peter.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. From our side, we'd like to welcome the updates that have been made to this important document. And we see this as a key document in the GEF's policy suite. But to begin, I'd like to echo the comment that was made by the Netherlands on the expectation of a proactive role of the GEF Secretariat in this matter. And in following up on any of the issues that are surfaced as a result of this policy, our funding is provided to the GEF, and so we expect the GEF Secretariat to be playing a proactive role in addressing these issues. I would also like to support the suggestion made by the U.S. In terms of considering an audit committee that could be looked at, that could be created to look at these issues going forward. In terms of the specific clarifications that we are requesting with respect to this document, we basically would like some more information on how this would work in practice. So in terms of the timeliness of the information, based on the policy, how and when would Council be informed of any potential issues? In paragraph 39, there is also reference made to Council being able to request the trustee to ask for additional information. What would be the actual triggers to be able to do this, and when would we be given an opportunity to make that request? The assessments are also based on self-assessments from the agencies, but there is reference made to the possibility of third-party assessments being done. What are the triggers to actually get to a third-party assessment, and so we understand when it would be applied? So overall, as I said at the outset, we're most interested in how this would work in practice and what the role of the Council would be in going forward. And in conclusion, I just wanted to also support the recommendation that was made by the Netherlands that the Secretariat come back in December 2020 once the self-assessments have been submitted, so that you can report on the findings of that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I want to call on Peter, followed by Ben.
Thank you, Naoko, and thank you to the Secretary for the work that's gone in to the development of this paper and the iterations that have resulted from your outreach to Council members, which has been very much appreciated. I think I would echo almost every speaker prior to me that the more we look at this, the clearer we can see that there are little gaps still remaining. But essentially, you know, this is the right direction for us to travel in, and the point being that accountability and transparency around our standards is critical for the health of the entire partnership and all partners within it. So this is not just a consideration for us as Council, but equally this should be of concern to the implementing agencies, the executing agencies, the governments on both donor and recipient sides. So I think it is important that we do devote some time and attention to this to show all partners, and indeed those outside the partnership, that we have a very robust and high set of standards that drive our relationships around fiduciary standards. So I don't want to sort of minimise the importance of this in any way whatsoever. Looking at the document, I think there's a couple of things I just want to pick up. First of all, is to support strongly the comments from Matthew a few moments ago with regard to capturing the executing agencies. It's important that the full chain of actors involved in the delivery of council-approved GEF projects right down to the ultimate delivery point are clear what the standards are, and there's an accountability mechanism that flows all the way down. So that needs to be, I think, absolutely critical, and the suggestions from Matthew I would support those. Similarly, the audit committee suggestion, I think, is a good one and a timely one. Such committees are not uncommon in similar funds and agencies to the GEF. It, of course, means a little more work for council members, but I think there's clearly enough interest across the council that would substantiate setting up an audit committee. The other value of, I think, an audit committee would be that while the standards are centred around, regulations, if you like, on fiduciary matters, and they come at them from a very legalistic perspective, the Council has an additional lens, and that is a political lens. We are representatives of governments. And I think where an audit committee would add value to the work of the Secretariat and the trustee would be to separate more clearly, perhaps, where we have political concerns. And I'd say political with a small p, not a party political lens, but rather where the letter of the fiduciary standards may have been satisfied, but the spirit perhaps not. And that's, having discussed with the trustee a little more yesterday, I think that's where some of the grey area exists. And I think an audit committee could actually help bring a sort of greater separation between the sort of the legalistic and the political lens in a way that would benefit the delivery of good accountability measures. I'd also support Carola in what she said earlier on, which has been echoed by several other speakers before me. I think we need a little more clarity on the procedures and the practices that are available to the Secretariat and to the trustee, and indeed to us as Council. In cases of non-compliance, I think we're identifying that there is a risk of non-compliance, and we're looking to close the door to that. But I think, as Anar said, how do we get there? What are the practices and procedures that are available? And Lauren's suggestion maybe of having an annex to the report, to the policy, which sets out the roles and responsibilities, I think is a useful additional point that would help bring greater clarity around procedures and practices also. The final thing I just wanted to mention was in relation to paragraph 7F, which has come up a couple of times. Like others, I too, and I think I'm nervous whenever I see words that are unquantifiable, or like promptly or in a timely manner. I often think that they don't help matters, and the simplest solution would be to remove them. So, looking at paragraph 7F, I just have a couple of quick practical suggestions. The first is that I don't think the 2 dot points should be dot points. I think they need to be numbered. And I say that because we may have to invoke them. So second dot point would be far stronger if it was paragraph 7F2. That may sound like a small point, but I think when it comes to invoking any follow-up measures, I think greater clarity on the precise elements of the policy that we are referring to would be helped by removing the dots and actually adding specific numbers, because they are 3 quite distinct steps, 3 separate points. On the principal sort of chapeau paragraph under F, I do not think in a timely manner helps us at all. The fact is that if a GEF partner agency has reached a determination, then there is nothing to stop that agency immediately notifying the Council through the Secretariat, because the determination has been reached. So if we want to replace timely, I think there could be a reformulation that the partner agency notifies the GEF Council through the Secretariat with a copy to the trustee immediately upon the agency determining that GEF funds are not being used or have not been used, etc. I don't see why there would be any difficulty with that, because the determination will have happened. Moving on then to the second dot point, I think this is a very welcome addition in the iterative process around this paper. Promptly doesn't help, and I think the simplest solution there is just to remove the word promptly. that the agency should report to Council through the Secretariat when an agency has taken under formal review. Again, that will be a decision by the agency. The minute they've made it, they can notify the Council. Respecting all the confidentiality undertakings, the mere fact of, and this is the alert point I think that Carola Marita I think mentioned also, promptly confuses, doesn't add anything at all. So I would remove promptly, and the expectation is that, again, effectively immediately, when the agency has taken under formal review, it notifies the Council through the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I want to call on Ben, followed by Garcia.
Thanks, Naoko. And again, following on from others, there's a lot of rich conversations come out so far. I mean, firstly, just to support others in highlighting the importance of these standards and echoing Peter just now in terms of that the GEF should operate at the highest standards of accountability and transparency. We also welcome the review process which has been set out in the paper. Just one small point on that, but before I get to a couple of the sort of substantive issues which others have raised, I noted that in paragraph 6 of the paper, it talked in the review that in relation to the governance framework criteria, it should include related institutional standards on gender-based violence and sexual exploitation and abuse. However, in paragraph 35, it says that wasn't updated, so it'd be useful to just clarify why it doesn't make sense to include something in institutional standards in this document. I realize the next paper, the next agenda item will deal more broadly at a project and program level, but this is more about the institutional level. Coming to the points that others have raised, I think the point which was raised by Matthew in terms of cases of non-compliance, they are obviously going to be different and deal with confidential issues. So being clear about the type and way we receive that information, I think, is going to be important and needs to be appropriate. So the idea of looking at the idea of an audit committee, I think that makes sense to have a look at that and whether that provides that function which we would like it to do. And I think it's important also the point being made in terms of ensuring there's accountability right way through to the executing agencies as well. Finally, just to again echo and agree the point which was first made by Carola and supported by Anna, in terms of ensuring that the GEF Secretariat is very clear in terms of what their role is, and that they're being informed by agencies, for example, in cases of non-compliance. So I think it is useful to be very clear in terms of what the roles and responsibilities are, particularly in terms of GEF Secretariat in case of these non-compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. May I call on Garcia, followed by Comlan.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you. Our constituency receives with pleasure these new standards for procurement and new norms for elimination of corrupt practices. Transparency is key to reach our targets, and it's important that we are recognized as a strong organization in terms of these norms. We thank the efforts made by the secretariats to ensure that information comes in a timely fashion, but we join Australia in asking that the information be given immediately rather than promptly. We would like to hear what the responsibility of the Council will be on these issues. We would like to have a document detailing our responsibilities, how we will be acting, and what we would need to do if agencies do not comply. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to call on Comlan, followed by Stéphane.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We welcome very positively this review of standards for transparency and the culture of reporting on managing resources for them. We are questioning, as my colleague from Mauritius said, on the cost of this whole procedure, costs that might be disproportionate as to the size of projects. And we think that we should have measures for the agencies to regulate the deviations that we see between the co-financing announcements and the disbursements of funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Stefan, followed by Fetui.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Our constituency welcomes the updated policy. Like others, we highlight the importance of these policies for the sound operation of the GEF. In the past, GEF Council has been made aware of misuse once the ship has already hit the iceberg, and as long as icebergs still exist. We all have constituencies and we have a responsibility, and we'd like to hear about these early on. So the early warning system, and many colleagues referred to that. So what's the appropriate adjective, or maybe no adjective at all? We can leave to the drafters, but something needs to be done. At the same time, we're operating in a space where confidentiality, reputation, it's very sensitive. So before you ring the alarm bell, you have to be sure that there's more than smoke, but that there's fire. So perhaps, and this is where we rely on, first of all, of course, the agencies, but then also on the Secretariat. Do not sit on information, but pass it on in the appropriate way. And perhaps in such a mechanic, a committee as suggested by Matthew and also echoed by some other colleagues is something to be considered. I'm not saying it is the solution, but it could be considered, because it would be a subset of the council that gets informed, and it would be like a partner also for the Secretariat to explore. Is that still at a confidential level where we don't have to inform everybody in the council, or is it important enough that it should go out? Other institutions have such committees. Sometimes they work better than less. Now, two more points. One, I felt from some of the statements that we do not have the full same understanding who all would be covered by this revised policy. I think, Peter, you used the term the full chain of actors should be covered by that. The full chain means the executing entities on the ground. Is that the understanding? And I would like to hear some clarification from the authors of the document. And the other one is, do you have any efforts planned to communicate that the understanding what is meant by these policies is understood by all the GEF agencies in a similar way? I love diversity, but maybe not when it comes to complying with standards. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to call on Fetui, maybe last speaker of this session.
Thank you. My constituency wants to join the unanimous chorus of support for the proposed new policy. And I think we take a philosophical approach. You know, we used to think that transparency and accountability was a concept that was imposed on us as small island developing states, but now on reflection, it is something that we should all value. And especially when you come to think of climate finance, when it is finite and when it can be exhausted, I think it is immoral if, for instance, some people are robbed of the opportunity to be able to access those resources because of some mismanagement somewhere, or there are some dishonest people. So I think that's the perspective we take, and therefore we are very supportive of any policy to ensure that that we can put a stop to this. It's important to have an audit report, but I always think of it sometimes in terms of like when you conduct a post-mortem. It's useful, but it's not going to bring back the person. You can find the cause of the reason for it, but I think the challenge for us, therefore, is to be to look at and try and build safeguards up front, so that we don't have to wait to move to do something after it has happened. And I think as long as people know that it's almost safe-proof not to try and do something unprincipled further down the line, so I think that's the challenge, not just for the Secretariat, for the agencies, but for the Council as well, and for all of us. And my concern is that it's the credibility of the GEF that's on the line. And once our partners start doubting the credibility of the organization, then they'll start to shy away from contributing generously to the resources that we support at the end of the day, communities like mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all. I think it's time for break for lunch, and we need to come back with fully recharged or fully replenished, so that may be good time to take a break. And I think that William will announce that lunch arrangement, but one of the lunch I really would like you, the council member and the alternate, could come, because it's a private sector engagement strategy lunch. So William, you could tell us on where we should go.
Thank you, Chair. The lunch that the CEO just mentioned with her and the representatives of the Private Sector Advisory Group is for council members and their alternates in the ABC dining room. So you go down the stairs and you turn around, and through the corridor there'll be GEF staff to guide you. We can for the rest of us, we can no longer use the atrium for lunch, therefore we're using the East dining room, also downstairs. There are 150 places in that one, and the overflow is in the room in the back here. Also 100 places there. The only thing we'd ask is please use those rooms for lunch, don't use this one. Okay, the services of the bank have asked us please not to use this room for lunch, as happened yesterday. So ABC dining room downstairs for the CEO lunch. Everybody else has the East dining room downstairs and the overflow in the back room here. So see you back at 2:30. Thank you very much.